LoveLore Library. Chapter 182. Master Liang's smug tone clearly made Lei Jiang uncomfortable, but there was nothing she could do. She could only say coldly, "I know, I will bring it over in a moment. It is best if you don't play any tricks. Master has said that you must see the item in half a month at the latest. Otherwise, even if you have the Emperor behind you, it is useless." Master Liang's smug laughter stopped. After a while, he finally said, "I know, do not worry. I know the relationship between the prince and your master. I am not someone who does not know the limits. As long as you give me the token, I promise to deliver the item to you when we reach Nanzhao." "That would be best," Lei Jiang said. The sound of footsteps gradually faded away. The room finally returned to silence. Only Master Liang's slightly muffled breathing could be heard. What to do? The four stood in a hidden corner. Han Mingxi signaled with his eyes to Sickly Scholar. Sickly Scholar lowered his eyes. A dark smile flashed across his already dark face. Han Mingxi's body trembled as she looked pitifully at Master Liang, who was pacing back and forth anxiously. "I wonder what kind of torture this old man will be subjected to." A short while later, Lei Jiang's footsteps sounded again. Lei Jiang, who had returned to the room, threw a small wooden box to Master Liang with a dark expression. "I have already ordered people to deal with those 4 people. You have the item. In a moment, I will send someone to send you to the capital of Nanzhao." Master Liang opened the box and looked inside. He nodded in satisfaction. "Very good, since this is the case, we will not waste time. Where are my steward and guards?" Lei Jiang snorted disdainfully. "Your steward's legs are still weak and can't walk. As for that guard, he is even more useless. When he came down, he fell off the cliff. The people of the Central Plains are useless. You..." Master Liang suppressed his anger and said, "I know, send me to Nanzhao as soon as possible." "Very good." Lei Jiang nodded in satisfaction. "Rest first, we will depart soon." Outside the hall, Yili glanced at Han Mingxi. Han Mingxi shook his head silently. There were indeed many corpses at the bottom of the cliff, but they were all bones that had been exposed to the wind and rain for many days. Zheng Kuei's body was not among them. Most likely, Zheng Kuei didn't slip and fall off the cliff. Instead, he was killed by these southern wilderness people. Sickly Scholar wasn't in a hurry to do anything to Master Liang. This was because the 2 southern Jiang people who were poisoned to death by Sickly Scholar had already been discovered. The originally quiet underground palace suddenly became noisy. Master Liang left under the protection of many guards. Yili and the other 3 could only split up to avoid being searched by the guards and prepare to leave. And San naturally went with Yili. Han Mingxi could only follow Sickly Scholar unwillingly. "Young master, Yili shook her head and said, "Let's not leave yet. Let's go in and take a look." Without Sickly Scholar and Han Mingxi in the way, it would be easier for them to act. He carefully sneaked into the depths of the underground palace. This underground palace wasn't too big. It was only divided into 7 or 8 rooms. The 2 of them searched through all the rooms, but they didn't find anything useful. Finally, they stared at the room in the deepest part of the room. Unlike the other rooms, this room's door was tightly shut. There were 2 southern wilderness people standing guard at the door with weapons in their hands. Yili glanced at Ensan and skillfully made a hand gesture. "You left, all right." Ensan nodded. The 2 lightly approached the door. Then, at the same time, one on the left and one on the right, they restrained the 2 guards. Ensan silently twisted the other person's neck. Yili looked at the unconscious person in her hand. She frowned and placed the person in a hidden place. Looking at the lock on the door, Yili frowned. She took out a golden hairpin from her sleeve and gently twisted it. She pulled out a sharp golden needle from the golden hairpin and twisted it a few times in the keyhole. With a cautious sound, the lock was opened. Yili nodded to Insan, who was in the dark. She pushed open the door and flashed through the door. Insan vigilantly squatted in the dark and watched the movements all around. After a while, Yili flashed out from inside and locked the door again. Probably because Han Mingxi and Sickly Scholars Group attracted too many forces, Yili and Insan clearly felt that the number of people searching was much less than before. Along the way, they followed the markings that Han Mingxi secretly left. In less than half a quarter of an hour, the two saw the light of the cave entrance in front. But at the same time, there was still a distance from the cave entrance and they could already smell the dangerous fragrance of flowers coming from outside. It was exactly the same as the fragrance of the flowers on the mountain. Insan took out a few pills and handed them to Yili. Yili crushed them and put them under her nose to smell. She whispered with a smile, "Where did you get these from, Sickly Scholar?" Without outsiders present, Insan's expression became a lot more lively. With a slightly proud smile, she said, "That's right, he has too many poisons on him. I was afraid of making a mistake, so I didn't dare take more. This is the kind of medicine he gave us before. It can last for about half an hour." Great. The two people each took a pill for a quarter of an hour. Insan took the lead and walked to the cave entrance to take a look. Only then did she turn around and beckon to Yili. The two carefully flashed out of the cave entrance but were stunned by the scene in front of them. In front of them was a vast expanse of bright red. The cave entrance was less than 2 meters below the cliff. At the bottom of the valley, there were all big red flowers blooming. Moreover, almost every flower had a red and black snake coiled around it. There were even some that climbed and wandered on the flower branches. Yili could finally understand Han Mingxi's mood when he couldn't help but curse when he came down. This damned place really made people feel a chill in their bones. However, the exit was in such a dangerous place. It wasn't arrogant of the southern border people to not have to be on guard. "Can we go over?" Yili pointed to the cliff and asked. Insan looked and nodded. "It shouldn't be a problem. Be careful. If you fall, no one can save you." As long as they fell into the sea of flowers, they would be swallowed by the flowers and snakes in an instant. Insan frowned. How will young master go over? He could use Qinggong to fly over, but he definitely couldn't bring someone over. Young master's Qinggong probably wasn't enough for him to fly over. The terrain here was too low and ropes couldn't be used. If he wasn't careful, he could be bitten by the snakes that could jump up at any time. Yili helplessly sighed. This broken place really gives people a headache. However, if we can get out, this adventure is worth it. You go over first. I'll go another way. Insan didn't move. Although he knew that Wang Fei was very strong, he really couldn't see any other way. It wasn't safe to stay here. Although there was no one here now, it didn't mean that no one would come. Looking at Insan's stubbornness, Yili helplessly waved her hand. "Forget it. I'll go over first. You stay here and watch. After I go over, you can go over. I really don't know why you guys are so stubborn." Insan said in a deep voice, "We are young master's shadow guard. Naturally, we should put young master's shadow guard first." Yili rolled her eyes at the sky. "Thanks. It would be better if you had more confidence in me." It wasn't until the sky gradually darkened that Yili climbed out of the cave. Using the dagger in her hand, she climbed up the cliff. Before she climbed a bit, she would look down at Insan, who was following behind her, and ask, "What are you doing?" Insan said in a deep voice, "I'm with young master." Chapter 183. You think I want to be like this? If I had your qigong, would have gone over directly. Yili looked at Ensan in annoyance and continued to climb. Ensan had already reached Yili's side and said, "This cliff is at least 100 zhang high. If young master wants to climb up directly, I'm afraid it will be a bit difficult." Yili laughed in a low voice. "Who said I have to climb all the way up? Just a little bit more will do. Wherever there is a protruding rock, that's it." And San looked at a rock that was protruding not too far away and nodded, "I understand. Young master, I'll go over first. Be careful," Yili instructed. And San nodded. Her left foot tapped on the cliff and her entire body shot out. However, perhaps because of her previous climbing posture, she seemed to be exhausted when she flew into the air. Although she could borrow strength from the flowers on the ground, if she was bitten by a snake, they wouldn't be able to find the antidote right now. Yili cursed in a low voice and the dagger in her left hand shot out towards Ensan's feet. Ensan once again soared into the air with the dagger and landed on the opposite side of the mountain with a few leaps. After losing a dagger, Yili spent a bit of effort to climb up the protruding rock on the cliff. The rock wasn't big. Even if Yili leaned against the cliff, she could only barely stand. This should be a protruding piece of a huge rock that grew in the mountains. After standing firm on the rock, Yili took a breath before taking out a rope from her bag. She fixed one end of the rope onto a sleeve arrow and shot it over. And San caught the other end of the rope and found a place to fix it. Then she shook the rope to inform Yili that she was ready. Yili also found a place to secure this end of the rope. She pulled hard on the rope before she grabbed it and slid it downwards. "Young master." Seeing Yili land safely, Ensan quietly let out a sigh of relief. Yili patted her clothes and said, "Let's go. This should be the mountain behind the village we lived in before. We should be able to find the way out from here." Ensan nodded and followed behind Yili, saying, "Gongzi, I know where this place is. This is the Snake Valley." Snake Valley. Third Secret nodded and said, "There were some seniors in the Shadow Guard who had followed the prince to the southern border. It was said that there was a snake valley in the southern border that was full of red snake poison flowers. However, it was said that the prince had burned down the Snake Valley. Unexpectedly, it had recovered in less than 10 years. However, the position doesn't seem right. The Snake Valley should be in the southwest of southern border. Why is it so close to Shattered Snow Pass?" Yili shook her head and said, "Someone must have deliberately left this place. Didn't you notice that the snake venom flowers were all arranged in a row? Even the distance between each flower was almost the same." Sickly Scholar snorted and said, "I believe that he will save you for the sake of the Tianyi Pavilion." Han Mingxi didn't get angry and said with a smile, "So what? He won't come to save you for the sake of you being the third master of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, right? Now it seems that we can only wait for Junwei to save us, right? As for you, third young master, why didn't you find someone to save us?" Han Mingxi looked at the sickly scholar who was hung up from the ground with a sidelong glance. Her stomach was filled with resentment. If this guy didn't force them to find the blue falling flower, how could he be so unlucky as to fall into the hands of these people? He hadn't seen the blue falling flower yet, but it was possible that they were about to go to hell. That would really be what Junwei had said about going to the ends of the earth. Sickly Scholar coughed a few times and said, "Since you have so much confidence in Chu Junwei, why do you keep muttering here?" Han Mingxi choked and said in a low voice, "Didn't you see the place we came out of? Junwei is different from you. He doesn't have any medicine to restrain the poisonous snakes. Who knows if they can come out or not? Maybe they will be knocked out by the ghost flowers as soon as they come out of the cave. And those poisonous snakes." Sickly Scholar was silent for a moment and said indifferently, "When we came down from the cliff, Shuo Jing took some medicine from me." Seeing Han Mingxi stare at him, he curled his lips and said, "Don't look at me like that. I only found out about it after I broke up with them. He took the anti-knockout drug and the muscle-weakening powder from me, the kind I gave you on the mountain." Han Mingxi rolled his eyes. "So you could only give me one kind of medicine. It stinks to death." Chapter 184. "Don't worry, they're fine." Sickly Scholar held back his cough and said in a low voice. Han Mingxi glanced at him. "How do you know?" "That surnamed Liang couldn't wait to kill us." But Lu Jiang didn't make a move. He must be waiting for them to come. They want to catch us all in one fell swoop. Han Mingxi frowned. Sickly Scholar said, "Don't forget that Chu Junwei was behind us the whole time. When we left the cave, they didn't follow us at all. After we left, they must have done something behind us. That's why we have to catch them." "Do you think they didn't see what you left behind on the way?" Han Mingxi said angrily, "You knew they were using us to lure Chu Junwei. Why didn't you remind me?" Sickly Scholar sneered disdainfully, "Why should I remind you? At least Chu Junwei still has a chance to save us. If he doesn't come, you and I are dead. If he comes, he might die with us. So what?" Pu. The window outside made two clear sounds. The two of them stopped and looked at the window at the same time. A nimble figure quickly jumped in through the window. He turned around and smiled at them. "Brother Han, don't worry. I definitely won't die with you." "Junwei." Han Mingxi called out in surprise. "Sho." Yili raised a finger to cover his mouth and blinked at him. Han Mingxi quickly lowered his voice and said, "How did you get in? This stronghold is full of ambushes." Yili smiled. "There's no such thing as a 100% safeguard in this world. It just depends on whether you can find a place to break through." "Ah. Brother Han, and Third Master, you all owe me a life." Sickly Scholar snorted, "That'll have to wait until we're out of danger." Chu Junwei must have heard the conversation between him and Han Mingxi. But looking at the youth's bright smile, Sickly Scholar wasn't sure if he was holding a grudge. "All right, you're right," Yili said helplessly. He pulled out his dagger and quickly cut the ropes on Han Mingxi's body. He casually threw him a sword and said, "It's not easy to find a suitable weapon in Nanjiang, just make do with this." Han Mingxi caught the sword and said with a smile, "Thank you, Junwei." The ropes on Han Mingxi's body were easy to get rid of, but the iron chains on Sickly Scholar's body were not so easy to get rid of. Yili spent a while to untie the iron chains. Sickly Scholar stretched his muscles and asked, "Where's your imperial bodyguard?" Yili smiled and said, "He is preparing a big gift for the Luo Yi tribe." Walking to the window, Yili imitated a few birdsong of different lengths. Not long after, a certain part of the stronghold suddenly became noisy, followed by even more places. In just a moment, it seemed as though the entire stronghold was bustling with noise and excitement. Yili smiled with satisfaction and said, "All right, let's go." As soon as Sickly Scholar pushed the door open, several feathered arrows were shot at them. Han Mingxi quickly grabbed him and pulled him back. Yili kicked the door. Behind them, several arrows were shot at the wooden door. Sickly Scholar angrily glared at Yili. Yili smiled kindly at him and said, "This is the thank you gift for the third leader who invited me to die with you." Sickly Scholar knew that he was in the wrong, so he snorted and didn't say anything. The archers outside were vigilantly staring at the door. With a bang, the wooden door was opened and a shadow rushed out. Whoosh whoosh. A cluster of feathered arrows was shot out. Bang bang. Two people came out of the windows on both sides of the small building. With a few whooshing sounds, several archers felt a piercing pain in their bodies and fell down one after another. Yili walked out of the door and glanced at the cloth bag on the ground that looked like a hedgehog after being shot by the arrows. She also saw the corpses lying on the ground. Her eyes darkened slightly. Let's go quickly. Shuajing's side won't be able to hold on any longer. At this moment, the entire stronghold was in chaos and several places were ablaze. It seemed that Shuajing had set a lot of fires and the places he had set were not ordinary places. Not far away, a few strange bird cries could be heard. Yili led Han Mingxi and Yili in that direction without hesitation. When they passed by a spring, Sickly Scholar sneered and took something out of his pocket and threw it in. Han Mingxi saw this and his eyes flashed. He didn't say anything and quickly followed Yili in front. By the time they arrived, third leader was already surrounded and was clearly struggling to hold on. Yili looked around and saw that all the important people in the stronghold were present. No wonder they had sent over 10 people to guard that place. Yili thought of something she had taken from the underground palace. It was clear that in Lijiang's eyes, that thing was much more important than Han Mingxi and Sickly Scholar's lives. Saving 2 and losing 1, this really isn't worth it. Yili helplessly frowned. Brother Han, can you catch that old man? Yili asked softly as she pointed at Master Liang who was under heavy protection. Han Mingxi frowned. There are too many people around him. Also, that old man is too fat. Sickly Scholar handed over 2 things. Throw this into the air and feed this into that surnamed Liang's mouth. That's more like it. Han Mingxi nodded as he took it in his hand. Third leader's expression was indifferent as he looked at the people wearing southern border clothing surrounding him. He mercilessly waved the weapon in his hand. Shuajing, hold your breath. Han Mingxi's voice suddenly sounded. A dark figure flew through the air and charged into the crowd. Third leader instantly held his breath. Southern border was different from Xiling. There weren't many people who understood the language of the Central Plains. So as soon as Han Mingxi landed, a bunch of people fell to the ground. Third leader also took the opportunity to escape the siege and jumped onto the roof. Han Mingxi successfully landed beside Master Liang. He didn't see him lying on the ground moaning. He opened his mouth and stuffed the medicine in. He patted his face with a smile. Old man, you're finished. Lijiang was one of the few southern border people who didn't fall. Seeing the people lying on the ground, his expression was extremely ugly. He looked at Master Liang who was crying for help. It was like he was looking at an enemy and a scourge. Damn Central Plains people. What did you do? Han Mingxi was in a good mood. The gloominess of the day had dissipated by half. He picked up Master Liang and threw him towards Sickly Scholar. He laughed. Chief Luo Yi, you still have the nerve to ask us what we did. Can't you think about what you've done? Lijiang snorted and said disdainfully. Do you think a small poison can stump our Luo Yi tribe? Han Mingxi shrugged indifferently. The poison isn't mine. What does it have to do with me? Why don't you let your people stand up? Sickly Scholar carried the fat old Master Liang out. At this moment, old Master Liang's face was as black as ink, and he looked like he was on the verge of death. It was obvious that he was poisoned with a strong poison. Lei Jiang was shocked. Although he was good at using poison to drive away snakes, he couldn't tell what poison old Master Liang had been poisoned with. Moreover, this Central Plains wealthy merchant that he hated couldn't die now. What do you want? Chapter 185. Sickly Scholar said indifferently, let us go, don't let anyone chase after us. Otherwise, I'll kill him. Lei Jiang thought for a moment and nodded, all right. But, return the things you took from the underground palace to me. He pointed at Yi Li and An San, his eyes filled with killing intent. Yili blinked and innocently smiled. It's not anything good, is there a need to? I'll just return it to you. Who knows what you're writing on it? Lei Jiang stared at him suspiciously. If you don't understand, why did you take it? Yili smiled. If it's something important, I suggest you don't decorate it so beautifully. Isn't it obvious that you're asking people to take it? This young master's favorite thing in life is those gorgeous little trinkets. Here, I'll return this useless broken thing to you. After saying this, Yili took out something and threw it over. Lei Jiang caught it in his hands. It was a dark wooden box. On the box, there were a few twisted words that he didn't know if it was a picture or a word. It could be seen that the box originally had some decorations on it, but now it was full of uneven holes. The decorations on it were obviously taken away by someone. Lei Jiang checked the box and found that there were no signs of it being triggered. He let out a sigh of relief. The expression on his face also became better. Looking at Yili arrogantly playing with a shiny golden object in his hands, he smiled and said, "There are a few other things that I took from the table. I believe that Patriarch Lei Jiang won't be so stingy as to not even let me leave a souvenir, right?" Lei Jiang snorted, "You can leave." He obviously knew what was missing from the underground palace. It wasn't anything important, so he was too lazy to pursue it with them. Sickly Scholar dragged Master Liang and warned him, "Don't play any tricks, otherwise I'll make sure he dies without leaving any ashes." Yili and Insan had already prepared horses. Once they left the village, the four of them mounted the horses and rushed towards the northwest. It wasn't until the sky gradually brightened that they finally saw the main road. They all breathed a sigh of relief. Han Mingxi smiled and said, "Yesterday was really exciting. It's all thanks to Junwei. Let's rest here for a while." The next town was only about 10 miles away from here. They could rest there for a day. If everything goes smoothly, we'll be able to reach Nanzhao's capital in 7 or 8 days at most. Sickly Scholar vetoed, "Let's bypass the town and head straight for Nanzhao's capital." "You're not tired, but we are," Han Mingxi said discontentedly. Sickly Scholar said coldly, "Do you think we can complain about the hotel if we bring him along? Also, do you really think that Lu Jiang won't send people after us?" Han Mingxi snorted. "Who's with you? You found the person you're looking for. Go ask him where the item is. Let's part ways and go our separate ways. Haven't we suffered enough because of you yesterday? Isn't that right, Junwei?" Yili played with the exquisite gem ornament in her hand and smiled. "It's not bad. But, if we go our separate ways, will Third Master give me the reward he promised me?" Sickly Scholar's eyes flashed, "So it's best to go the same way, right? Otherwise, young Master Chu won't be at ease." Yili smiled and said, "Anyway, so many things have already happened. It doesn't matter if it happens a little more. If we give up halfway, wouldn't it mean that everything I did yesterday was in vain?" Hearing Yili say this, Han Mingxi could only nod helplessly. "I hope this young master won't be killed by you." Yili smiled and said, "Actually, Brother Han can return to the Central Plains as soon as possible. In any case, Brother Han isn't interested in what Third Master is looking for." Han Mingxi turned his head and flatly refused. "This young master thinks it's fun to follow Junwei. Wherever Junwei goes, this young master will go. If we go together, then let's go together. When has this young master ever been afraid of anyone?" The four of them decided to rest for a while. Sickly Scholar didn't want to wait any longer and dragged Master Liang to the side to torture him. Han Mingxi was also jealous of Master Liang and followed to watch. Yili expressed that she wasn't interested. Although Insan was interested, he definitely wouldn't show it in front of outsiders. He also stayed by Yili's side to protect her. Yili walked to a large tree and sat down. She glanced at Han Mingxi and Sickly Scholar in the distance before taking out some odds and ends from her sleeves. Among them were 2 pieces of white paper. Yili took out a sharpened charcoal pen from her bag with satisfaction and began to write and draw on the paper. And San stood to the side and looked at his distorted and strange drawing on the paper. Didn't young master say that he didn't know these words? Did young master lie to them? Yili shook her head and smiled. I don't really know, but other people do. However, it's a bit difficult to remember things that you don't know. Originally, I should have remembered it yesterday, but I was worried that it would be troublesome if it was discovered. Now, I shouldn't have remembered wrongly. After speaking, Yili lowered her head and continued to write and draw on the paper. She said to Insan, actually, I don't really know what this thing is either. However, I do recognize that box. The thing that I knocked off seems to be the imprint of the southern border saintess, so this thing should be very important. Actually, she saw some more interesting things. However, she could understand those things, so she naturally remembered them well. After looking at it for a while, she threw it back to its original place. Of course, she didn't need to rush to write it out now. And San nodded and silently felt pity for clan leader Luo Yi, who thought that the treasure was undamaged. He definitely wouldn't know that when young master was waiting for the sky to turn dark in Snake Valley, he had already taken out the thing inside and studied it for over an hour before putting it back. In his heart, San was very impressed with his master's lockpicking skills. He was thinking about when he should ask young master for advice. After a while, Yili slowly wrote on a piece of paper. Satisfied, he checked his memory twice before handing it over to Insan and said, "Get someone to send this home as soon as possible and see what this thing is." Insan nodded and thought for a bit before looking at Yili. He wanted to say something but hesitated. Yili looked at him with some amusement. If you have something to say, just say it. Insan looked at the paper in his hand and asked in a small voice, "We've already been out for quite some time. Since young master wants to send a letter home, shouldn't you write a letter home to let the family know that young master is safe?" A letter home. Yili was stunned. Ever since she came out, in order to not let people discover her whereabouts, she never gave Mo Xiaoyao any information. Even the shadow guards who were scattered all over the place didn't contact her. Thinking of what Mo Xiaoyao told her, Yili couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Looking at the extra paper in her hand, since there was still some left, she might as well write a letter. Yili didn't care what Sickly Scholar did to Master Liang. When she saw Master Liang being dragged behind Sickly Scholar, she only told him to be careful not to kill him. Sickly Scholar wasn't a good person with a kind heart, and this Master Liang wasn't a good person either. Hearing Yili's words, Sickly Scholar only snorted in disdain and didn't say anything. If he didn't want a person to die, then that person couldn't die even if they wanted to. But looking at Sickly Scholar's gloomy face, Yili knew in her heart that he probably didn't get what he wanted from Master Liang. After all, if this old man's mouth was that easy to pry open, he wouldn't have followed him all the way to Nanjiang. But Sickly Scholar wasn't completely without gain, at least he waited for that so-called complete token. Yili looked at it from afar. It was a piece of jade engraved with strange patterns. Because Sickly Scholar didn't plan on sharing it with them, Yili didn't ask about it. The group carefully avoided the people sent by the Luo Yi tribe to follow them, and rushed towards Nanzhao's capital without stopping. Feng Zhiyao looked at him with surprise and said, "Don't you know Nanzhang's language?" Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, "This isn't the same. It should be Nanzhang's ancient language." Feng Zhiyao took the letter and looked at it. The twisted and strange characters made his head swell. It looks a bit like Nanzhang's language, but it seems. I can't understand it. How does Wang Fei's sister-in-law know this kind of strange language? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head to look at the other letter that was clearly short, and said, "She doesn't know it." She memorized these words and then wrote them out from memory. Feng Zhiyao didn't believe it. She doesn't know this kind of twisted thing. How can she memorize it from memory? Mo Xiaoyao faintly glanced at him. Feng Zhiyao rubbed his nose and said, "All right, we do have many people who are proficient in the current language of the southern Xinjiang, but if it's the ancient language, that seems to be something that the southern Xinjiang stopped using more than 200 years ago, right? In the past, although Nanjiang relied on the previous dynasty of the Central Plains, there were many tribes, and their language was different. It wasn't until Nanzhao was established that the current unified language of Nanjiang was implemented. Who knew which clan's language was written on this piece of paper? If it's in the capital, I'm afraid I'll have to find Elder Su. He might be able to see what this is." However, although Elder Suzhi was a person of virtue and prestige, he was still an official of the imperial court. If it really was an important secret, he would have to report it to Mo Jingqi. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and shook his head, saying, "Elder Su has never had a good impression of Nanjiang. He's not proficient in Nanjiang's language." Feng Zhiyao's eyes turned and he said with a smile, "Speaking of which, Yao, have you forgotten an important person?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his brows, calmly staring at him, warning him not to be deliberately mystifying. Feng Zhiyao giggled, saying, "Don't forget, which family our princess comes from. In the entire Dechu state, is there any family more knowledgeable than the Su family? If even the Su family can't decipher this, then we can't hope to do it." Mo Xiaoyao frowned and lowered his head to look at the short family letter in his hand. He picked up the gold ornament on the table and carefully examined it. "Do you think this looks like an ornament?" Feng Zhiyao didn't understand. "Is it not?" Mo Xiaoyao felt the obvious scratches on the back of the gold ornament. This should be an ornament that was forcefully pried off from something. Also, do you remember which clan in Nanjiang had a sunflower as their emblem? Feng Zhiyao frowned and thought hard. The sunflower is also known as the sunflower. It likes warmth and is resistant to drought. Nanjiang is not very suitable for it to grow. Therefore, there doesn't seem to be any clan that uses it as their emblem. But, do you remember that there was a princess from the previous dynasty who married the leader of a tribe in Nanjiang? Mo Xiaoyao was silent for a moment. They were all people familiar with history books. Even if they didn't pay attention to these things, the previous dynasty and Dechu state were so close, so they naturally had some impression. It was the Chaoyang princess of the previous dynasty. Feng Zhiyao said with a smile, "Yes, the rumored name of this princess had the character Kuei." Then, if Li brought this out, it means that it is not a normal antique. Does this have something to do with the previous dynasty's princess? The descendant of the previous dynasty's princess. When the previous dynasty fell, this princess had already been married for 200 years, right? Who knows? Feng Zhiyao shook his head. Mo Xiaoyao was silent for a moment before saying, "Send someone to secretly send a copy of this seal to Yunzhou. Also, if the shadow guard in Nanjiang finds Li, immediately tell her not to worry about this matter." Feng Zhiyao put away the letter with some surprise and said, "Wang Fei has clearly done well. If there is a chance to continue investigating, she should know many secrets of Nanjiang. Why not? We can send people to help Wang Fei." Mo Xiaoyao stared at the gold ornament in his hand and said in a low voice, "I don't know why, but I feel that there is a great secret hidden in that piece of paper. It's just that we don't have a clue yet. Lily doesn't know anything. It is very dangerous to rashly investigate." Feng Zhiyao shrugged helplessly. "All right, everything will be done according to Prince's orders." Feng Zhiyao took the item and left. Only Mo Xiaoyao was left in the room. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head to look at the letter in his hand again. Other than a simple explanation of what happened after entering Nanjiang, there was only a short sentence of, "Don't miss me." Gently stroking the letter in his hand, Mo Xiaoyao's lips curved into a bitter smile. Yili and the other three rushed all the way and arrived at Nanzhao's capital in less than 7 days. Once they reached the capital, Sickly Scholar took Master Liang and left without hesitation. Han Mingxi was so angry that he couldn't help but curse. What does he mean? Is he going to burn the bridge after crossing the river? Yili glanced at him and said with a smile, even if he burns the bridge after crossing the river, what can you do? The Tianyi Pavilion had people in Nanzhao, and so did the Yanwang Chamber. The Tianyi Pavilion was an intelligence organization, and the Yanwang Chamber was an assassination organization. So what if they were dissatisfied? No one could do anything to Sickly Scholar. Han Mingxi crossed his arms and looked at her. Didn't you want some medicine to prolong life or revive the dead? If you let him go just like that, do you think he will obediently deliver it to you? Chapter 187. Yili smiled, even if you insist on following him, he won't give it to you obediently. If he doesn't give it to me, won't he go find it himself? She didn't come to Nanjiang for Sickly Scholar and his Bailuo flower. She couldn't follow him all the time. But, this kind of thing didn't necessarily have to be done by herself. As soon as they entered Nanzhao's capital, Han Mingxi took Yili to the best restaurant in Nanzhao's capital to reward himself for his hard work these days. After ordering a table full of Nanjiang food, he went back to his room to rest after eating heartily. He also said that unless the restaurant caught fire, no one was allowed to disturb him for 2 days. Yili and Ensan were left speechless as they stared at the swaying figure going upstairs. Young Master Han really isn't like young Master Mingyue. Ensan sighed. Yili smiled at him. Do you really think he went upstairs to sleep? I bet he can sleep until midnight tonight at most. And it was already evening. Ensan frowned and didn't speak. Yili waved her fan in a good mood. Let's go out for a stroll and see Nanzhao's night scenery. Compared to the solemn and grand Chu capital, Nanzhao's capital was much smaller. It also wasn't as prosperous as Chu capital. Everyone was wearing Nanjiang's clothing. Yili and Ensan were wearing the clothing of the Central Plains and had an extraordinary bearing. Naturally, they were very eye-catching. However, Yili didn't have any interest in Nanjiang's clothing. She didn't plan on changing her attire if it wasn't necessary. Young Master! A surprised exclamation came from behind. Yili and Ensan turned at the same time to see an heir who hadn't been seen for a long time. Yili was a bit surprised. She didn't plan on going to find her big brother as soon as she arrived in Nanzhao. Why are you here? Big brother is also here. An heir's face was tired. He said hoarsely, this subordinate has failed young master. Young Master Su. Young Master Su has disappeared. What? Yili was shocked. When did this happen? An heir said in a low voice, it's been more than half a month. 2 days before this subordinate arrived at the capital of Nanzhao, young Master Su had already disappeared. It's been so many days. Who knows about this? Yili asked with a frown. An heir said in a low voice, it is said that before young Master Qing Chen left, he told him to come back in 5 days, so at first no one cared. On the morning of the 6th day, young Master Qing Chen was still nowhere to be seen. Only then did she realize that something was wrong. My subordinates and the shadow guard of Nanjiang also secretly investigated, but there was no news. A few days ago, I already had someone send the news back to the capital. It's just that young master has been concealing his whereabouts all this time, so we didn't receive the news. Yi Li's face darkened. She was worried about Su Qingchen's safety. Who was Big Brother with before he disappeared? It's the Nanjiang King's crown princess Anxi. She's Princess Xixia's elder sister and the next Nanzhao king. She and young Master Qing Chen are friends. After young Master Qing Qin came to southern border, he has been staying in the princess residence. An heir said. Yili nodded and ordered, get someone to send the information about Nanzhou's capital over as soon as possible. Also, I want to see Princess Anqi. An heir nodded and said, I understand. But, under what name do you plan to meet the crown princess? Even though Nanzhou was a small country, the crown princess and the princess were not people that ordinary people could meet. Yi Li's eyes turned and she said with a smile, Yunzhou's Chu family's third missy, Chu Luyun. Young Master Qing Chen's fiancé. An heir and an heir's face stiffened, and they had a headache. Is the princess consort ruining my reputation or young Master Qing Chen's reputation? Yi Li's expression was normal as she looked at the two stiff faces with a smile. What else can I do? Go to find cousin as princess consort Ding. Okay, an heir, you will follow me for this period of time. An heir, secretly investigate Nanzhou and Big Brother's matters. Also, if Han Mingxi comes to find me. An heir continued, I understand. I won't let young Master Han get suspicious. That's good. You don't have to pay too much attention to him. Just try not to let him get close to me. We'll go back first. An heir, get ready. We'll visit Princess Anqi tomorrow morning. Yes. The next morning, Yi Li, who had been reading dossiers the whole night, opened the door after hearing a soft knock on the door. An heir looked at the woman standing at the door with a smile and couldn't help but be dazed. He had gotten used to the princess consort's male disguise and almost forgot that the princess consort was still a teenage girl. Speaking of which, it had been less than 2 months since they left the capital, but she had left a deeper impression than the previous year. Looking at the woman in front of him now, she was wearing a light yellow robe embroidered with green plum blossoms. Her hair was tied up in a small bun, and there was an exquisite and elegant 4-butterfly silver biao on the bun. Her forehead was covered by thin bangs, which made her look even more delicate and delicate. The slender silver butterflies in her hair trembled slightly, making the girl look more charming and naughty. She was not very similar to the quiet and elegant princess consort of King Ding's mansion in the capital. An heir had to admit that the princess consort's disguise skills were not something normal people could match. Shuijing. Yi Li raised an eyebrow and looked at the shadow guard in front of her who was thinking about something. An heir came back to his senses and said with a calm expression, Young Miss was right. Han Gongzi left the inn last night and hasn't returned yet. Miss is now. Yi Li waved her hand and said with a smile, It's been hard on you. Go back to your room and rest. I'll go down by myself. Yes. Yi Li went downstairs in a good mood. An heir was waiting for her in the hall downstairs. Last night, she had come in with an heir and opened 2 other rooms. Coincidentally, an heir and an heir's rooms were sandwiched between her 2 rooms, so no one had discovered that the 2 rooms belonged to the same person. Now, they just had to check out and leave together. If Princess Anqi was interested, she would find out that they entered the city last night and stayed in this inn for 1 night. That was all. She took an heir out of the inn and the 2 headed for Princess Anqi's Fu that was not far from the Nanzhou Palace. They waited outside the Princess Fu for a long time before the person who went to report came out to invite them in. Nanzhou's architecture was very different from the Central Plains, but the capital city was mostly the same. However, the Princess Fu was much smaller than the enormous Ding Wang Fu. It was about the same size as the Yi family's Fu. The architecture of the Central Plains had many of the characteristics of Nanjiang, giving people a strange feeling. The 2 were invited to the hall. When they came in, they saw a tall woman wearing blue embroidered clothing sitting in the hall. The woman's clothing was not the usual straight and narrow sleeves, but clean and tidy sleeves. The embroidery on the cuffs and the hem were embroidered with the seal of the Nanzhou Imperial House. She was wearing a silver belt that accentuated her slim figure, making her look even more agile and valiant. Compared to her sister Princess Xixia, the #1 beauty of Nanzhao, she wasn't beautiful enough. However, her sparkling eyes made her look even more eye-catching. Seeing Yili come in, Princess Anqi's gaze carried a trace of inquiry. Yili frowned and raised her small face proudly. "Why didn't you invite us to sit down?" After a long while, she burst into tears. She wiped her tears and said, "I ran out with the guards. If I couldn't find Brother Qinchin, my father would break my legs. Boo-hoo. I don't want to go back. I want to find Brother Qinchin." Princess Anqi touched her forehead. Okay. Miss Chu, how about this, you stay in my mansion for a while. When young Master Qinchin comes back, you can go back together, okay?" Hearing this, Yili immediately smiled through her tears. "Thank you, sister princess. You're so kind." Princess Anqi summoned a maid and led Yili to the guest room to rest. After the maid left, Yili looked at an heir guiltily and asked, "Do you think Princess Anqi can become my sister-in-law? It would be troublesome if she ruined her elder brother's marriage because of this." She didn't want to become the third party in a melodramatic plot. An heir shook his head with a serious expression. "Impossible. Although the Su family doesn't discriminate against the alien race, the Su family hasn't married anyone of the alien race for hundreds of years. Moreover, Princess Anqi is the crown princess of the southern frontier. Her status is noble. The Su family can't possibly allow the next head of the Su family to marry into the southern frontier. More importantly, given young Master Qinchin's personality, if he was truly interested in Princess Anqi, he definitely wouldn't call her a friend." Yili tilted her head in thought. What an heir said made sense. If she ruined her elder brother's marriage because of this, it would be a grave sin. However, she felt that this Princess Anqi wasn't bad. She had seen so many princesses. Other than Princess Chang'e, who was still a young girl, this Princess Anqi seemed the most reliable. If it were any other princesses, who knew how they would deal with her upon hearing that she was the fiancée of their sweetheart? She was indeed worthy of being her elder brother's friend. "Miss, what are your plans?" an heir asked. Yili smiled. "If I stay in the princess residence, won't I be able to inquire about my elder brother?" An heir replied, "But if you stay in the princess residence, it will be inconvenient to enter and leave. Mrs. movements will also be restricted." Yili shook her head and smiled. Princess Anqi wouldn't go so far as to put her friend's fiancé under house arrest, would she? Right now, it is more important to find out my elder brother's whereabouts. After all, even after so many days, the shadow guard still hasn't been able to figure out where my elder brother ended up. An heir lowered his head. "Ashamed," he said, "it is this subordinate's dereliction of duty." Yili waved her hand and smiled. "How can I blame you? If everything could be made clear, then there would be no such thing as a secret in this world. I only hope that my elder brother is safe and sound." Thinking of Su Qinchin, whose whereabouts were unknown, Yili could not hide the worry in her heart. Princess Anqi's residence was not large. Perhaps it was because the southern border was not strict with men and women, but Su Qinchin's room was in the same courtyard as Yili's. Yili did not conceal her whereabouts. Directly asking for the location of Su Qinchin's room, she went over. Pushing open the door, she saw that the room was very clean. Although Su Qinchin had been gone for many days, this room was still cleaned every day. Su Qinchin's belongings were all in the room. Yili looked carefully. Su Qinchin's clothes, jade pendant, folding fan, and the travel notes that he carried with him when he was bored were all in a bundle in the cabinet. On one side of the desk, There was a white porcelain tea set with blue and white flowers that Su Qingchen liked. Some books, ink, paper, and inkstone were neatly arranged in the middle of the book. Obviously, Su Qingchen had lived here for a long time. Yili went to the desk and sat down. She picked up a book and began to read. "Miss Chu, why are you here?" Princess Anqi's voice sounded at the door. Yili looked up and saw her standing at the door, frowning and looking at her. Yili quickly got up and looked at her uneasily. She said, "Sorry, I heard that Brother Qingchen used to live here, so I wanted to come and have a look. I just wanted to find a few books to read." Princess Anqi came over. Looking at the books on the table, her eyes were warm. She asked, "You also like to read?" Yili lowered her eyes and nodded shyly. She said, "Brother Qingchen is the most talented person in the world. I want to read more books." Princess Anqi nodded and said, "Young Master Qingchen also likes to read. When he has nothing to do, he always has a book with him. I only know the characters of the Central Plains. As for the books, I don't understand them." Yili put down the book in her hand and said in a low voice, "I heard Brother Qingchen mention you, Princess. You are the Crown Princess of Nanjiang. What you care about is important matters. It's natural that you are not interested in these poems and articles." Princess Anqi smiled generously and said, "I learned the characters of the Central Plains late. It's good enough that I can understand them. Even if I am interested, I can't understand them. Since Miss Chu likes the books in the study, you can read them. These were all bought by young Master Qingchen. They are useless here." Chapter 189. Yili nodded, "Thank you, Your Highness." "Your Highness." Yili looked at Princess Anqi and hesitated. Princess Anqi raised her eyebrows and motioned for her to continue. Yili asked softly, "I want to find Brother Qingchen as soon as possible. He hasn't written to every family for a long time. Can you tell me where he said he was going when he left? So I can take the guards with me to find him." Princess Anqi looked at her for a long time and frowned. "It's not that I don't want to tell you where he is, but I'm looking for him too." Yili guessed happily, then, has he left Nanjiang and returned to the Central Plains? Princess Anqi shook her head, "There are still many things to do in Nanjiang. He won't leave so easily. Besides, if he really left, he would have said goodbye to me. He should have at least left a message. Then will he be in danger?" Princess Anqi looked at her awkwardly. After a long time, she shook her head, "I don't think so. Master Qingchen is very smart. He'll be able to deal with anything. But Brother Qingchen doesn't know martial arts. He can't even beat Lin Han, who is by my side," Yili shouted anxiously. Princess Anqi comforted her softly, "Trust me. He'll be fine. I promise." Yili's eyes flickered and she looked up at her with hope. "Really? You promise?" Princess Anqi nodded heavily. "As the Princess of Nanzhao, I promise that he'll be fine. You just have to wait in the mansion. You'll see Master Qingchen soon." Yili nodded, "Okay, I believe you, Your Highness. But I'm going to find Brother Qingchen." Princess Anqi looked at her helplessly. "You can only stay in the capital. You can't run around. If Master Qingchen comes back and can't find you." "I know. Thank you, Your Highness." Outside the door of the guest courtyard, the smile on Princess Anqi's face gradually faded. As he walked towards his courtyard, he turned around and asked the person following behind him, "Have you investigated Miss Chu's side?" The man beside her replied in a low voice, "Your Highness, we've checked. Miss Chu only entered the city yesterday when it was almost dark. After entering the city, they stayed at the most famous inn in the capital. This morning, after checking out of the hotel, he asked around for the location of the princess residence and came straight here. However, she didn't use Chu Liuyun's identity. Instead, she used Su Yun and Lin Han. Princess Anqi nodded. It's not too much to use an alias when you're outside. Anything else? The man shook his head and said, there's nothing else. If we want to verify Miss Chu's identity, I'm afraid we'll have to send someone to the Dechu state. It'll take at least a month for a round trip. Princess Anqi shook her head. I'm afraid we don't have the time. She must know Qingchen, and she must be very familiar with him. It was more important to find Qingchen as soon as possible. Whether it was him or not would be clear once they found him. Just send someone to keep an eye on them during this time. Yes. Anything else? The man hesitated for a moment and said, when we went to check on Miss Chu, we found that 3 people from the Central Plains came to the inn yesterday. Their names were nothing special, but they might not be their real names. Does it have anything to do with Miss Chu? It doesn't seem like it. They arrived 4 hours earlier than Miss Chu, and one of them went back to his room to rest after eating. The other 2 went out and came back after Miss Chu checked in. We haven't seen them yet. Then, don't bother about them first. It's normal for people from the Central Plains to enter and leave the city from time to time. This is the responsibility of the capital's guard general. It'll be troublesome if we interfere too much. Yes. Your Highness, the king wants to see you. Got it. I'll go to the palace immediately. Yili brought a poetry book back to her room and sat down to read it peacefully. Princess Anqi could become Nanzhao's crown princess because she wasn't a brainless princess. At least, the people she sent to keep an eye on her knew their limits and wouldn't let the guests feel offended. Yili couldn't be bothered to say anything more. If Princess Anqi really believed her completely, then she would have to doubt the crown princess's brain. Princess Anqi left the residence. An heir came in and said in a low voice. Yili nodded and said softly, that princess isn't simple. Don't get too close to her, lest you get misunderstood. An heir frowned and looked outside the door. She doesn't believe us at all. Isn't it completely useless for us to stay here and make it difficult for us to escape? Yili shook her head. Princess Anqi must know where Big Brother went. Even if she can't find Big Brother now, she clearly isn't worried about Big Brother's safety. What has Big Brother been doing since he entered Nanzhao? Can you find out? An heir nodded. This subordinate will give it to you before tomorrow. Yili nodded and frowned as she stared at the book in her hand. Her mind had already flown far away. Big Brother clearly hadn't been taken away. He had gone somewhere of his own accord. But he didn't return at the time he agreed with Princess Anqi. Big Brother didn't have any interests or enemies in Nanzhao, so he could only have gone for Princess Anqi. Even so, according to Big Brother's meticulous nature as inherited from eldest uncle, he shouldn't have left behind no clues. The clues, where were they? She threw a piece of paper on the table. Yili took out her usual charcoal pen and quickly wrote and drew on the paper. In his mind, he kept thinking about all kinds of complicated information about Nanjiang that the secret guard had sent over last night. He quickly drew a chart of the distribution of forces in Nanjiang on the paper, and analyzed the relationship between the various forces in the capital of Nanzhao. After a while, a large piece of paper was filled with all kinds of simple symbols and strange characters. An heir looked strangely at the things he couldn't understand and didn't ask. Yili Gu put down the pen and looked at herself on the paper, stunned. It wasn't that she deliberately wanted to guard against anyone. In fact, what was written on this paper wasn't a secret. It was just that she had re-summarized the information she saw last night. Looking at the paper that was fluently mixed with at least 4 languages, Yili couldn't help but smile helplessly in her heart. In fact, she had been missing her previous life. She could be a quiet and perfect princess, but she didn't like it. So after leaving the capital, she deliberately avoided Imo Shioyao's protection and chose to travel in a dangerous way. Putting aside the chaotic thoughts in her mind, Yili stared at the paper on the table for a long time. Then she frowned and asked, "Why is there no news about the Saintess of Nanjiang?" The clear drawings in front of her showed that they had very little information about the Saintess of Nanjiang, an important person in Nanjiang. Even if there was, it was only a few words. It was the most basic information. It was almost the same as what she knew in the capital. Only her age, name, and even appearance weren't clear. If the Saintess of Nanjiang was fighting with the crown princess to usurp power, there wouldn't be so little information. Chapter 190. An heir said, "The Saintess of Nanjiang is known as the patron saint of Nanjiang. She is enshrined in the Saintess Hall 5 li outside of Nanzhao City. Except for major events and festivals, the Saintess will not leave the Saintess Hall. Usually, only the 36 maids chosen to serve the Saintess can approach the Saintess. The current Saintess, Xu Manlin, succeeded at the age of 15. In the past 8 years, she has left the temple 10 times, but each time she wore a mask. It is said that in the entire Nanzhao, except for the previous Saintess who has entered the Holy Land of Nanjiang, no one knows what she looks like." Yili shook her head. "That is impossible. The current Saintess does not have the right to teach the next Saintess." "Then who taught the Saintess? Who raised her when she was young? Who are her parents? And, if no one has seen the Saintess' true face, then, who can be sure that the person under the mask is the real Saintess of Nanjiang?" This. An heir frowned with some hesitation. Yili picked up a pen and wrote a few lines on the paper. "Carefully investigate the Nanzhao royal family and the Saintess of Nanjiang. Don't miss any details." An heir replied, "Yes, this subordinate will immediately send people to do it." "Miss Suspects, the Saintess of Nanjiang." Yili played with the charcoal pen in her hand and smiled. If the Saintess of Nanjiang really doesn't leave the temple, how could she hook up with Li Wang? A few years ago, when Li Wang went to Nanjiang, the Saintess of Nanjiang did not appear. Then. An heir's eyes lit up. They have met in private. The alliance with Nanjiang is so important that it is impossible for Li Wang to send someone to discuss it. Also, it is not easy to see the Saintess of Nanjiang. Yili nodded and leaned back in her chair, thinking, "Saintess, this identity is really strange." Suddenly, a girl with an unknown identity, origin, and ability is pushed to one of the most respected positions in the entire Nanjiang. Are the people of Nanjiang too easily trusting? An heir shook his head and shrugged. If a random person in our Dechu state was named the crown prince, even the emperor's golden mouth and jade words wouldn't be able to convince the public. The Saintess system in Nanjiang seems to be as long as the history of the Nanzhao kingdom. It wasn't that long. Before Nanzhao was established, each tribe governed their own affairs. There was no such thing as a holy maiden. Indeed, after Nanzhao was founded, the state preceptor at that time, who was also the priest of the Nanzhao royal family, chose the first holy maiden. An heir lowered his head and recalled. Yili raised an eyebrow. It sounds like the imperial tutor and the holy maiden have similar roles. So after the holy maiden appeared, Nanzhao no longer had the title of imperial tutor. An heir nodded and pondered for a moment before saying, "The imperial tutor's actions aren't as strict as the holy maiden's. The responsibilities that need to be fulfilled are more or less the same. However, in the hearts of the southern border people, the holy maiden is clearly more worthy of worship than the state preceptor. Compared to an old man who likes to wander around, most people prefer a mysterious and beautiful girl," Yili agreed. In the morning, after eating the breakfast brought by the maid, Yili prepared to go out with an heir. But at the door, she met Princess Anshi, who was also about to go out. Miss Chu, are you going out? Yili greeted her with an expectant and nervous smile. Sister Princess, is there any news of Brother Qinchin? Princess Anshi shook her head regretfully. Apologies, Miss Chu. There's no news of Master Qinchin yet. Yili lowered her head in disappointment. She said in a low voice, It's okay, Brother Qinchin will be fine. Lin Han and I will also go out to find Brother Qinchin. We'll definitely find him soon. Miss Chu is new to Nanzhao and unfamiliar with the place. Where do you want to find him? Yili helplessly counted with her fingers. She said in a low voice, I'll look around. Maybe I'll find him. Princess Anshi couldn't help but smile. If Miss Chu feels bored, you can walk around the capital. If there's any place you want to go, you can ask the people in the residence to guide you. But there are many dangerous places in Nanjiang. Miss Chu, please don't go alone. Don't let Master Qinchin worry. Yili nodded. I know. Thank you, Sister Princess. You'll find Brother Qinchin soon, right? Or I'll write to Uncle Su. Brother Qinchin said that Uncle Su is the smartest person in the world. He'll definitely find Brother Qinchin. Mr. Hongyu? Princess Anshi asked softly, startled. Yili nodded heavily. She said with a smile, Sister Princess also knows Uncle Su. Did Brother Qinchin tell you? Princess Anshi nodded slightly. She said with a smile, Don't worry, Miss Chu. I promise I'll find Master Qinchin soon. The road to Nanjiang is difficult. Don't let Mr. Hongyu worry. Otherwise, won't young Master Qinchin feel uneasy when he finds out? Yili blinked. She looked at Princess Anshi in confusion. After a while, she nodded and said, Sister Princess is right. After watching Princess Anshi leave, Yili followed her with a smile. Tell someone to follow Princess Anshi. Yes. In the inn, Han Mingxi walked down from the lobby with a satisfied expression as if she had just woken up. Her languid and elegant demeanor that was different from the people of the southern border immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the inn. Han Mingxi didn't care about other people looking at him. He lazily walked down the stairs and asked the waiter, Have you seen the two masters with me? The waiter felt dizzy. He quickly said, Master, the two masters left early this morning. Chapter 191. Yes, I've compared the information I got from the Tianyi Pavilion with our own information. There's not much difference, and San replied. Yili nodded in satisfaction, that's good. If there's someone who can deceive the Shadow Guard and the Tianyi Pavilion at the same time, then it wouldn't be an injustice for us to be fooled. When we return, ask the Tianyi Pavilion for information on the Saintess of Nanjiang. I told Han Mingxi that I want the hidden luo flower. If we ask for information on the Saintess of Nanjiang now, Han Mingxi won't be suspicious. Yes. Young Master, there's news on Sickly Scholar's side. I'm afraid Master Liang won't be able to hold on any longer. Are you? Yili frowned in annoyance. She didn't expect to receive news of her brother's disappearance as soon as she arrived in Nanzhao. As a result, not only could she not get any advice or help from Su Qinchin, she also had to find Su Qinchin's whereabouts in the shortest amount of time possible. This made her a little busy, but she couldn't ignore Sickly Scholar. Master Liang isn't a martial artist after all. Besides, with Sickly Scholar's methods, I'm afraid even a martial artist won't be able to hold on for long. Before, Sickly Scholar was afraid that he wouldn't have any clues if he killed Master Liang. Now that the token was in his hands, even if Master Liang didn't say anything, he could always find some clues if he put in some effort. And without the token, Master Liang wouldn't be able to explain himself. Where are they? Outside the city. Yili thought for a moment and said, it's more important to find my brother first. Let the Shadow Guard keep an eye on them. If there's no other choice, help the people of the Luoi tribe rescue Master Liang first. We can't let him tell Sickly Scholar the way to obtain the hidden Luo flower. At least not before we have the time. If we can't, we can only snatch it. If we can't, we'll destroy the hidden Luo flower. We can't let Sickly Scholar get it. And San said hesitantly, the hidden Luo flower might be able to cure the prince's illness. If it's destroyed, that's why we have to try our best to get it. But if we really can't get it, we can't let Sickly Scholar get it. Who do you think the first person he'll deal with? Yili asked with a smile. Prince. What's the reason for this? He's going to Nanjiang alone and he didn't use the power of the Yanwang chamber. Why did he go to Nanjiang alone this time? He went alone to Nanjiang. And didn't use Yanwang chambers. Why he went to? Is it for him to send him alone? Did he go alone to go? The other two heads of the King of Hell's pavilion must have disagreed. Back then, Sickly Scholar had almost lost his life due to his serious injuries. Even now, he was barely hanging on. How could he not hate him? However, Yama's pavilion and Ding King's palace made an agreement to never offend each other. So he can only rely on himself. Thinking of Sickly Scholar's resentful eyes when he mentioned the hidden Luo underworld, Yili couldn't help but shudder. Because of this, the thought of killing Sickly Scholar first popped up in his mind. However, this thought only flashed through his mind. Whether it was because of Sickly Scholar's identity or other reasons, she couldn't kill him now. At least, he couldn't die in the hands of Princess Consort Ding. This subordinate understands. I will never let Sickly Scholar get the hidden Luo flower. Somewhere in Nanzhao, in his secret palace, there were marble floors and pillars carved with exquisite patterns, exquisite gold ornaments and utensils inlaid with gems of various colors, and countless luminous pearls replacing the light formed by candles. Nanjiang's most precious hibiscus muslin was wrapped in layers. Behind the muslin, an elegant man in white was sitting quietly reading a book. Under the soft light of the luminous pearls, the man's perfect side face was suffused with a faint luster, and his whole person seemed more quiet and peaceful. The heavy stone door was pushed open from the outside, and a slender and graceful woman slowly walked in. Different from the traditional Nanjiang costume, the woman wore a bright yellow wide robe with phoenix patterns, and the hem of the robe dragged on the ground. Her black hair was casually tied up, decorated with gorgeous multicolored gems, and a delicate golden mask covered her entire face. The delicate mask had a strange charm, making the eyes under the mask even more dazzling. The woman walked gracefully, looked at the man in white, and whispered with a smile, "Young Master Qingchen, you really don't want to look at me? As long as you nod, I will take off my mask and let you see." Su Qingchen put down the book in his hand, sighed softly, looked up and asked, Are you more beautiful than those on the Chu capital beauty map?" This seemed to be the first time Su Qingchen responded to this question. The woman was a little surprised. "You like the women of the Chu state?" "I have also heard of the Chu capital beauty map. Which one do you like more?" "Is it the number one beauty of the Chu state, Su Zuidi?" "She seems to have died." Su Qingchen smiled faintly. "Su Zuidi is indeed a good beauty. If you are not as beautiful as her, then don't look at her." "You." A trace of anger flashed in the woman's eyes, but she quickly calmed down, and said with a smile, "Young Master Qingchen is too picky. As far as I know, your little fiancée is indeed good-looking, but she doesn't seem to have reached the level of absolute beauty." Su Qingchen lowered his eyes, hiding the strange look in his eyes. The woman took Su Qingchen's silence, and said with a snort, "Speaking of which, that Miss Chu is indeed deeply in love with young master. She actually came all the way to Nanjiang with only one guard. Miss Chu really doesn't seem like a woman of the Central Plains." "Where is she?" Su Qingchen asked. Yesterday she came to our Crown Princess Anshi's residence with great fanfare. Since Princess Anshi and young master are good friends, I'm sure she will take good care of young master's fiancé. The woman covered her mouth with a smile. Young master Qingchen, are you really not going to consider my proposal? After this is done, you and I can share the world. Su Qingchen's expression was calm, and he said softly, if this one guesses correctly, 3 years ago, Miss also made a promise to share the world with Dechu State's princely. The woman flicked her sleeve disdainfully and said with a smile, emotingly. How can he compare to young master? No. I believe that in this world, besides Prince Ding, there is no one who can compare to young master. Only. Prince Ding is already crippled. Young master is the most perfect man in this world, and the most compatible man with me. Su Qingchen shook his head. I am truly sorry. The Su family has a rule of marriage. The descendants of the Su family are not allowed to covet beauty, wealth, or power. This one can only marry one person in this life. Miss, it is useless to keep me locked up like this. Nanzhou's capital is not big, it is only a matter of time before someone finds this place. The woman half leaned on a marble pillar and giggled. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you? In this half year, how many bad ideas have you come up with for Anshi? How many things have you ruined for me? Don't you like women from the Central Plains? Am I not more like a woman from the Central Plains than Anshi? Su Qingchen shook his head and lowered his head to continue reading, saying, if you wanted to kill me, you would have done so long ago. Also, what good would it do you to kill me? That's right. The woman sighed helplessly, killing you is really troublesome. The Su family of the Central Plains, and maybe even the Ding Crown Prince's residence will make trouble for me. Also, our Crown Princess will definitely fight me to the death. But, although I can't kill you, I can lock you up here. That way, you can't ruin my business. Without you, it won't be long before Anshi, that arrogant and annoying woman, dies a horrible death. Of course, there is also your cute fiancé. Chapter 192. You're not allowed to touch her. Su Qingchen seemed to be enraged and warned her coldly. You really care about her? The woman looked at Su Qingchen strangely. Why would you like a little girl who hasn't grown up yet? Su Qingchen said indifferently, as long as she's my fiancée, I'll naturally care. The woman stared at her. You mean no matter what kind of person she is, as long as she's your fiancée, you'll care about her? Su Qingchen smiled. Isn't that natural? Since she's my future wife, if I don't care about her, who else would I care about? You. Fine, I'll show you what I'm capable of. The woman sneered and glared hatefully at Su Qingchen before leaving in a huff. Hearing the heavy stone door close again, Su Qingchen slowly put down the book in her hand. Her handsome eyes drooped. Fiancé. Miss Chu. Late at night, Princess Anshi's residence was quiet. Only the light in the study was still faintly lit. Princess Anshi's handsome face showed a trace of tiredness as she frowned at the man in front of her. Is there still no news from Qingchen? The man shook his head and said in a low voice, no. Princess Anshi said anxiously, what's the matter? Does she still not believe that we really think Qingchen is missing? The man nodded, it's very likely. Although we've sent people to look for young Master Qingchen, it's very likely that she still thinks we're working together with young Master Qingchen to put on a show for her. I hope nothing bad happened to Qingchen. Princess Anshi closed her eyes tiredly and rubbed her aching forehead. We've spent so much effort and finally made the situation better. If we fail now, I'm afraid. Father. The man frowned. His Majesty still doesn't believe the princess. Princess Anshi smiled bitterly. Father is just over 40 years old and is in the prime of his life. Even if he believes us, he won't support us. He needs another force to suppress me, the crown princess. If it wasn't for father's secret favoritism, they wouldn't have failed again and again in the past 6 months. Every time they were about to catch that person's tail, she would escape. Now even the commander's seal is in her hands. If we can't get the commander's seal back, nothing we do will be of any use. Princess Anchi didn't understand why her wise father would side with that woman. But he couldn't just stand by and watch as she tried to do something bad to Nanzhao. This was her responsibility as the princess of Nanzhao and the crown princess. Can you find out where young Master Qingchen is? Princess Anchi asked. If you can't find out, then ask Qingchen to withdraw first. This is Nanzhao's own matter. We cannot implicate him. The man shook his head and said, I'm afraid not. Although we receive news from young Master Qingchen from time to time, it is young Master Qingchen who gets in touch with us. We have no idea where young Master Qingchen is. Damn it! Princess Anchi cursed. Assassin! A shout came from outside the courtyard. Princess Anchi stood up abruptly. The man beside her pulled out his sword and opened the door. But soon he came back and said with a frown, they are going to the guest courtyard. Princess Anchi said, there is only Miss Chu in the guest courtyard. Why would the assassin want to find her? Let's go and have a look. Then she rushed out of the door and went to the guest courtyard. The man quickly closed the door and followed her out. The study was quiet again. The window in the corner moved slightly. Then it was pushed open. A black figure quickly flipped in. A pair of clear and beautiful eyes were revealed under the black mask. The black-clothed person quickly walked to the desk and flipped through the files on the table. After looking through them once, she didn't seem to have found anything. She then went to the bookshelf behind her to look for something. There weren't many books in Princess Anchi's study. Most of them were official documents, and most of them were written in Nanjiang. After a long time, a file hidden in the most inconspicuous corner of the bookshelf fell into the eyes of the person in black. What caught her attention was not the file itself, but the seal on it. It was a sunflower-shaped seal. The eyes of the black-clothed man flashed, and a thin blade appeared at his fingertips. He quickly tore open the sealed file. She glanced through it quickly. A faint smile appeared in her beautiful eyes. After resealing the file, she restored the study to its original state. Then she flipped out of the window. In the guest courtyard, Princess Anchi was stopped at the door by an heir when she arrived with her guards. An heir looked at the people in front of him with a sullen face and said, Princess, it's so late. What's the matter? Princess Anchi said, assassins just broke into the guest courtyard. Is Miss Chu all right? Assassins? An heir frowned and said, I've been keeping watch outside. No assassins came in. Princess Anchi was surprised. Her guards would never lie. Besides, she did see several black figures enter the guest courtyard from a distance. Why did Miss Chu's guards deny it? Guard Lin, Miss Chu is young Master Qingchen's fiancée. If she is hurt, I can't explain it to young Master Qingchen. Is it true that no one broke into the guest courtyard? An heir's face was unhappy. He said in a low voice, when there was a quarrel outside, there were several black figures approaching. But they were scared away by my hidden weapons. Some of them should have been injured. But they definitely didn't enter the guest courtyard. Miss Chu's reputation is important. Princess, please be careful with your words. Looking at an heir's gloomy and serious expression, Princess Anchi finally understood why this guard insisted that the assassins didn't come in. The women of the Central Plains were much stricter about their reputation than those in the south. My apologies, Guard Lin. It was this princess's slip of the tongue. She waved her hand to let the guards behind her leave to continue searching for the assassins. Then she turned to Air and said, "Did the commotion just now scare Miss Chu? Why didn't she come out?" Air said indifferently, "Miss Chu lives in the inner courtyard. Perhaps she didn't hear the commotion outside." Princess Anshi frowned and said, "Since it's inconvenient for Guard Lin, this princess will go see Miss Chu in person. It's not good if she's scared." "No, princess sister, what's the matter?" Air was about to refuse when Yili's voice came from behind. Yili was wearing a large cloak. Her beautiful hair was draped over her shoulders. There was a faint sleepiness and confusion in her eyes. The one holding the lamp beside her was really a maid sent by Princess Anshi to serve her. Princess Anshi smiled and said, "It's nothing. Just a few thieves broke in." "Did they disturb Miss Chu?" Yili tilted her head and smiled peacefully. "Don't worry. Lin Han's martial arts are very good. He's been protecting me all this time." "Lin Han, right?" Air lowered his head and said respectfully, "That's right. Don't worry, Mississippi. The assassins didn't come in just now. I've already beaten them away." Princess Anshi looked at Yili and saw that there was nothing wrong with her. Then she nodded and said, "In that case, Miss Chu should have a good rest. I'll send people to look elsewhere in case any fish escapes the net." "Yes, thank you for your hard work, princess sister." Yili smiled obediently. Watching Princess Anshi leave, the smile on Yili's face gradually disappeared. She turned to the maid beside her and said, "Let's go back." The maid nodded and followed Yili to the inner courtyard. As soon as they entered the room, they felt their backs go numb and they fell to the ground. Air quietly appeared at the door. Yili raised her eyebrows and looked at him, asking, "What's the matter with the assassins?" Air said in a low voice, "There were indeed assassins. They should have come from Mississippi." Air walked into the room and pulled out a black-clothed figure from under the bed. A total of 3 people came. They underestimated the enemy too much and were discovered by the princess's guards. After being injured by my hidden weapon, they immediately left. This one was the most seriously injured and was caught by me. Chapter 193. Yili squatted down and looked at the person on the ground. He looked like a typical person from Nanjiang. Even though he was wearing black night clothes, he didn't hide his features. They shouldn't be Princess Anshi's men. Chu Luyun shouldn't have any enemies in Nanjiang. Who dares to chase after the princess and provoke her? Air frowned and said, "Could it be that someone else knows about our identities?" Yili shook her head. "That's not right. If someone really knows about our identities, I'm afraid it won't be as simple as these few low-level assassins. What happened tonight is more like a demonstration or a provocation to Princess Anshi." "A demonstration, a provocation to Princess Anshi? Is it because of young Master Qingqin?" Air guessed. Yili nodded and said thoughtfully, "I think so too. In Nanjiang, the only person related to Chu Liyun's identity is Big Brother. But what's the use of such a provocation if it doesn't hurt? In comparison, it's more useful to capture me to threaten Big Brother. If Big Brother is in the other party's hands. With these assassins' abilities, they can't take anyone away from the princess residence even if I'm not here. They haven't even touched the guest house, but they have already alerted the princess residence's guards. Such assassins can't even kill people, let alone kidnap someone alive. Miss, can you guess who did it?" Yili smiled lightly and said, "I didn't know at first, but I'm quite confident now. Tomorrow, I'll try out your interrogation skills and verify my theory." Air knew many interrogation experts, such as the romantic and elegant Feng Sangongzi Feng Jiyao, the leader of the hidden guards who was responsible for training them, and the Dingguo Wang Fu's steward Uncle Mo, who was solemn and silent but actually had a good heart. However, an heir never knew that the originally delicate princess consort Ding's master was also an expert in this area. Many times, the four of them couldn't help but secretly guess how badly the Yi family treated the princess consort back then to distort a rich young lady from a prestigious family like this. It would take a lot of effort to bring that unlucky assassin out of the princess residence. At this moment, the princess residence was under martial law, and the price of bringing him out might not be proportional to the rewards they would receive. So an heir didn't plan on waiting until tomorrow. He prepared to pry open that unlucky guard's mouth on the spot. The guest courtyard wasn't small, and Yi Li's room was located in the innermost part of the courtyard, so as long as they didn't shout, even the people outside the courtyard wouldn't notice anything. Of course, the shadow guard who had been hiding in the princess residence would not allow anyone who was not supposed to get close to the guest courtyard. After the unlucky assassin was forced to drink a cup of herbal tea mixed with tendon-softening powder, he couldn't scream even if he wanted to. Thus, a few strange scenes appeared in the elegantly decorated room. On one side of the couch lay a maid from Nanjiang who had fallen into a deep sleep. Sitting at the table was a charming young girl who was writing and drawing under the lamp. A few steps away, however, there was an inhumane interrogation going on under torture. An heir's face darkened as he broke the assassin's left leg bone. That assassin's face was deathly pale and he was drenched in sweat, but he still clenched his teeth and refused to speak. Because of the restrictions of this place, he couldn't use too troublesome and bloody methods. This made an heir's face become more and more ugly. Even after Yi Li finished dealing with her own matters and raised her head, an heir still couldn't get the assassin to spit out a single useful sentence. Instead, that assassin almost bit his tongue and committed suicide. Is it no good? Do you need help? Yi Li stood up and asked. An heir's mouth twitched. He shook his head and said, "There's no need to trouble young miss with this kind of thing. No problem. Even if you break another leg, he still won't confess. Then I'll break all the bones in his body." An heir coldly stared at the assassin. Yi Li shook her head and said with a smile, "When you break half of his bones, he'll be dead. What idea does young miss have?" Yi Li leisurely walked over. She squatted down and smiled at the assassin on the ground. She softly said, "Do you understand Central Plains language? Don't worry, I won't be as rough as him." The assassin vigilantly stared at the charming young girl with a kind smile. As an assassin, his intuition told him that this pretty and cute young girl in front of him was the truly dangerous person. "Don't be afraid, I won't break your bones like he did. I plan to remove all the bones in your body," Yi Li said with a smile as she looked at the assassin who was staring at her with vigilance. "Don't be afraid, I won't break your bones like he did. Let's start from your fingers." Her slender white hand held the assassin's left hand. With a gotcha sound, a knuckle on the left index finger strangely twisted. Yi Li continued to move downwards. Another crisp sound was heard, and her entire index finger was twisted. The assassin's jaw was dislocated and he couldn't even cry out. He could only make vague "ah" sounds. Yi Li looked at him. "Nod your head whenever you want to, but don't wait until I remove all the bones in your body before you nod. By then, it'll be too late." "Gotcha." Yi Li's expression was calm, but her hands were moving in an orderly manner. And it was this kind of calmness that was more frightening than an heir's threatening words. When Yi Li's hand moved to the assassin's right hand, the assassin who was breathing weakly finally nodded his head with difficulty. Yi Li raised an eyebrow and looked at an heir from the corner of her eyes. "I thought it was some tough bone, but it's just like this." An heir silently wiped the sweat from his forehead. He also felt that this assassin was a bit too useless. But at the same time, he felt that his master wasn't scary because of her methods of torturing people, but rather that terrifying calmness. If it was him, he would also be scared. Very good, but you can't joke with me. Otherwise, the consequences will only make you regret living in this world. Yili sincerely looked at him and advised. Yili nodded in satisfaction. Very good. Then tell me who your master is. Waving her hand to indicate for an heir to close his jaw, Yili asked. A trace of fear flashed through the assassin's eyes. He looked at Yili and opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. Yili wrinkled her brows and thought for a bit before saying, if you're worried about your life's safety, I can guarantee your safety. Moreover, after I finish the matters in Nanjiang, I can give you a sum of money to let you change your surname and start a new life. The assassin's eyes flashed and there was a bit of hesitation on his face. Yili saw this and the smile on her face became even more sincere. Your information is very important to me, so as long as you give me true information, I promise to fulfill the promise. However, I think you should also understand that you're not the only one who knows the information. If you don't say it, others might say it. At that time, I'm very sorry, I can only. Seeing the assassin's nervous expression, Yili said with a smile, no, I won't kill you. When I came to Nanjiang, I passed by a valley that was filled with blood-red flowers. There was also a small snake under each of the flowers. At the time, I was thinking, with so many snakes, what would they eat to grow? What do you think? Snake. Snake Valley. No. It wasn't only the people of the Central Plains who were afraid of a place like Snake Valley. The people of Nanjiang weren't afraid of snakes, but other than the snake tamers, there was no one who wasn't afraid of thousands of uncontrolled poisonous snakes. Chapter 194. Then, your answer. I say, what do you want to ask? Yili turned to look at an heir and raised an eyebrow in satisfaction. In reality, she didn't get much information from the assassin. After all, it wasn't likely that the person sent out as cannon fodder was a core figure. However, at least it confirmed part of Yili's guess. At the same time, they locked onto the target of Su Qingchen's disappearance. However, Su Qingchen's exact location was still unknown. Since it was confirmed that Su Qingchen's life wasn't in danger for the time being, Yili's worried heart finally relaxed. Junwei. Junwei, there was a burst of cheerful shouts on the noisy street. The passers-by all looked over and saw a handsome man wearing white clothes of the Central Plains waving happily at a youth not far away. Yili turned back and saw the man in white running towards her. She sighed helplessly and raised a smile. Brother Han, I haven't seen you for a few days. How have you been? Han Mingxi looked at Yili with bewitching eyes and hidden bitterness. Junwei, I came thousands of li to Nanzhao with you and you actually abandoned me. You are so cruel, Yili unconsciously shivered. Although the passers-by didn't understand what he was saying, seeing his appearance and hearing his tone, they unconsciously looked at them strangely. Brother Han. Yili couldn't help but rub her forehead. She did her best to control her temper before smiling. Brother Han has finally slept enough. How rare. Han Mingxi didn't feel guilty at all. He moved closer and smiled. No, I woke up a long time ago and strolled around the city. However, I didn't see Junwei. Junwei, why didn't you tell me about this? Wouldn't it be safer for me to go with you? Yili rolled her eyes at him. I'm just looking around. I'm not going into a dragon's den or a tiger's den. Han Mingxi shrugged and said indifferently, even if Junwei wants to go to a dragon's den or a tiger's den, I will go with you. He didn't forget to wink at Yili. His eyes were saying, look at how good I am to you. Yili frowned. She did not expect to run into Han Mingxi. However, it was obviously very inconvenient to bring Han Mingxi along now. If he didn't bring him along, given Han Mingxi's personality, he really didn't know what kind of mess he would make the Tianyi Pavilion make in the capital of Nanzhao. Yili lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then she said, "Brother Han, let's talk somewhere else." After finding a room in a tea house and sitting down, Yili said, "Brother Han, I have some matters to attend to. It might not be convenient for you to follow me." Han Mingxi rested his head on the table and glared at Yili as he complained, Why didn't you say it was inconvenient when you asked for information about the Tianyi Pavilion? Now you want to dump me. You're abandoning me after seducing me." Yili was speechless. She had paid a corresponding price for the information about the Tianyi Pavilion. She didn't ask him to work for free. Seeing that Yili didn't want to talk to him, Han Mingxi bit his nails and said with a smile, "What can happen in such a small place like Nanzhao? Didn't Jun Wei come to find the Netherworld flower? I have the information about the Saintess of Nanjiang. Otherwise, it would be Sickly Scholar. I also know the whereabouts of Sickly Scholar, but he seems to be targeted by another group of people. Jun Wei, it's better not to provoke them. Otherwise. Young Master Qingchen is missing, right?" Han Mingxi tilted his head and smiled innocently. The Tianyi Pavilion's information is indeed worthy of its reputation. Yili sighed softly. Han Mingxi said with a smile, "Does the Tianyi Pavilion sell information? There are only a few major events in the capital of Nanzhao recently. What are we doing?" "So, Jun Wei, which one do you want to deal with first?" Yili stared at him. After a long while, she said softly with a smile, "Do you know where young Master Qingchen is?" Han Mingxi's eyes flashed and he said with some dissatisfaction, "You want to find him first. Jun Wei, I thought the Biluo flower and the Netherworld flower were more important to you." Yili said, "You can take them at any time. If you don't find them, they may not be intact." Han Mingxi looked at her with his chin propped up. "You want to know about young Master Qingchen? Tell me, what's your relationship with him?" Yili shook her head and said with a smile, "You don't know about Su Qingchen. Otherwise, you wouldn't be negotiating with me now, right?" Han Mingxi snorted and stared at her with a gloomy face. "Then do you want the information about the Saintess of Nanjiang? If you don't, I'll burn it." "He's my elder brother," Yili replied. Han Mingxi frowned. He looked at her up and down for a long time and asked, "Brother, are you Su Qingbai or Su Qingyan? In terms of age, you are more like Su Qingyan, but in terms of character, you are like Su Qingbai. But, no one said that the young masters of the Su family know martial arts." Yili said with a smile, "It seems that the information of the Tianyi Pavilion is not so reliable. The third young master of the Su family, Su Qingfeng, is now serving in the army. Brother Han, don't you know?" Han Mingxi stared at her suspiciously. "Are you really a member of the Su family?" Yili smiled but didn't say anything. She neither admitted nor denied it. Han Mingxi walked back and forth in the room with some irritation. From time to time, he muttered to Yili to vent his dissatisfaction, "You lied to me. You are not looking for the Netherworld flower. You are looking for Su Qingchen. Jun Wei, you lied to me. Young master." An heir's voice came from outside the door. The door was pushed open from the outside. An heir glanced at Han Mingxi and said to Yili, "Young master, there is news." Yili nodded, "Come in and talk." Inside the room, Yili and an heir both looked at Han Mingxi. However, the usually tactful young master Feng Yu was unexpectedly oblivious. It seemed that he didn't understand the other party's desire for him to leave. He sat in the chair and began to eat the snacks. Yili waved her hand helplessly at an heir and said, "Forget it. Just say it." An heir nodded and said in a low voice, Princess Anshi came into contact with young Master Qinchin today, or someone related to young Master Qinchin. Yili frowned. What do you mean? An heir said, when Princess Anshi returned home today, her body was stained with some special incense. The people of Nanjiang don't like incense, so they don't have any special research on incense. But they don't know that in the Central Plains, even the same incense has many different things to pay attention to. For example, among the young masters of the Su family, other than the third and fifth young masters who don't use incense, the second young master is used to using plum incense. The fourth young master prefers orchid incense. As for young Master Qinchin, because he goes out all year round, the incense is personally made by Madame Su. She adds some medicine that is beneficial to the body, so he has a very light medicine box. It's definitely not easy for ordinary people to distinguish, and it's even more difficult to imitate and make it. Yili frowned. Where did Princess Anshi go? The palace. This morning, the king of Nanzhao summoned Princess Anshi. After leaving the palace, Princess Anshi went straight back home. An heir said with certainty. Han Mingxi smiled curiously. Young Master Qinchin can't be in the palace, right? An heir hesitated and said with a frown, the chance of Princess Anshi seeing young Master Qinchin with her own eyes is not high. From the time Princess Anshi entered and left the palace, other than when she had an audience with the king of Nanzhao, she was basically in our line of sight. It's impossible for her to see young Master Qinchin. Except when she had an audience with the king of Nanzhao. And, after returning home, Princess Anshi sent more people to secretly look for young Master Qinchin. Yili shook her head and said, the king of Nanzhao should know elder brother's identity. If something happens to elder brother in Nanzhao now, it won't do him any good. So, elder brother's chance in the palace is not high. That incense should be a message from him to tell us that he is safe now. Chapter 195. And San didn't understand, since young Master Qinchin is not in the Imperial Palace, why would the message come from the Imperial Palace? Why would the perfume that young Master Qinchin carries with him be in the Imperial Palace? Naturally, it is because the other party may be someone from the Imperial Palace. Even if they are not, they are people who can freely enter and leave the Imperial Palace. Han Mingxi lazily shook his head. That's not right. Junwei. In Nanzhao, other than the crown princess, no one can freely enter and leave the Imperial Palace. This includes the other princesses. Of course, even this princess is not in Nanzhao right now. Yili glanced at him. It is not difficult in the open, but not in the dark. In the dark. The two asked in unison. Yili frowned and asked, have you found the traces of those assassins? And San nodded, we found them, but we were a step too late. They were killed on a small mound 2 li outside the city. Their bodies were left in an abandoned cave. Speak carefully. When we were looking for their bodies, we found them in a secluded cave 10 miles west of the city. But there were no signs of fighting at the scene. Although that place was not far from the capital, the road was very difficult to walk on and there was nothing around. Even if those assassins were running for their lives, they should not have forgotten that direction. But fortunately, the hidden weapon that injured them had a tracking medicinal scent. It took an entire night to find them. They should have been killed not long after they left the city. Then the bodies were thrown into that cave. Yili rubbed her brows and asked thoughtfully, in which direction were they killed? East. In other words, they originally wanted to go east, but after they were killed, the mastermind threw the bodies to the west. What is there in the east? Yili stood. Give me the map of Nanzhao's capital. And San lowered her head and took out a thin piece of paper from her chest and carefully spread it on the table. Han Mingxi looked over and pursed his lips. The entire map of Nanzhao's capital. Junwei, you didn't need to go to the Tianyi Pavilion to gather information, did you? Yili smiled and said, the more information we have, the safer we will be. I have always cherished my life. Besides, I don't believe that the Tianyi Pavilion can't come up with this map. This was not a defensive map, but an ordinary map of the layout of a city. He took out a charcoal pencil and circled the imperial palace on the map. He went to Princess Anqi's mansion, the place where Su Qingchen went missing, the place where her body was dumped, and the place where she was killed. He looked up and asked, "How do you feel?" Han Mingxi pointed at the drawing and said, "If you don't look at the location of the corpse and the princess's residence, these locations seem to be very close to the Saint Lady Temple. Speaking of which, if I hadn't seen this picture, I wouldn't have known that the Saint Lady Temple was so close to the palace." The Saint Lady Temple was located on a mountain 5 miles east of the capital. But if you count the distance from the palace and the journey up the mountain, it would take at least 10 miles to get to the Saint Lady Temple. Yili pointed and lowered her head. Ordinary people only think that the road from the Imperial Palace to the Saint Lady Temple is not close. Moreover, the Imperial Palace is built on a mountain. The mountain behind the Imperial Palace is steep and dangerous. It is difficult to get to the Saint Lady Temple from the mountain, and it will take more time than leaving the city directly. So basically, no one has paid attention to it. In fact, the distance between the Imperial Palace and the Saint Lady Temple is less than 2 miles. Tunnel? And San asked. Haven't we seen the ability of the people of Nanjiang to dig tunnels on our way here? Yili asked with a smile. The two of them thought of the almost hollowed-out mountain at the same time and fell silent. What did the king of Nanzhao, who founded the country, think? Why did he still build the Imperial Palace? Han Mingxi asked in confusion. In the history of the Central Plains, only temporary palaces or side palaces would be built on mountains. The real imperial palaces were all located in the center of the capital city. It not only showed the nobility of the royal family, but also showed the majesty of the people. Yili replied without much seriousness, "The customs are different." Han Mingxi could tell at a glance that she was just being perfunctory. He glared at Yili unhappily for a long time and found that the other party was still immersed in her own thoughts. Han Mingxi's face suddenly darkened. After coughing twice to attract the attention of the two people in the side room, Han Mingxi smiled and said, "You suspect that young Master Qingchen is in the Saint Lady Temple? As everyone knows, the Saint Lady of Nanjiang is as pure as ice and as pure as jade. The Saint Lady Temple does not allow men to enter, let alone harbor men. If people know that you think so, believe me, you will be drowned by the anger of the people of Nanzhao." Yili said indifferently, "Is it because everyone knows that it is more likely?" Han Mingxi rolled his eyes. "Then how can young Master Junwei enter the Saint Lady Temple, which is as guarded as the Imperial Palace, and find young Master Qingchen who is hidden somewhere? If we can't find him and you are found, we will really be killed by the people of Nanzhao." "I don't plan to enter through the Saint Lady Temple," Yili said. Han Mingxi's face was full of shock and admiration. "So young Master Junwei plans to brave the Nanzhao Imperial Palace. Brother Junwei, even if the Nanzhao Imperial Palace is not even a third of the size of our Chu capital, can you not look down on them? Don't forget, there are no poisonous snakes in our Chu capital's Imperial Palace, but Nanzhao might not." Yili smiled faintly. "You speak as if young Master Fengyu has never been to the Imperial Palace. Who was it that bragged a few days ago that someone had visited the Imperial Palaces of various countries?" Han Mingxi was speechless. For some reason, she began to silently regret bragging about her past romantic history to Junwei when she was bored during the journey. "Even if you go in and find young Master Qingchen, how will you bring him out?" Han Mingxi asked. "As far as I know, young Master Qingchen does not know martial arts at all." Yili frowned and said, I have to think about it carefully." They definitely couldn't force their way in. Even if the Shadow Guard was strong enough to snatch someone from the Nanzhao Imperial Palace, it would be troublesome to deal with the aftermath. If outsiders knew that the people who made the move were from the Ding Imperial Palace, it would be even more troublesome. Seeing her frown in deep thought, Han Mingxi smiled cheerfully and said, "How is it? Do you need help?" Yili looked at Han Mingxi and shook her head. She and Han Mingxi were only partners. Last time, Han Mingxi had taken many risks with her. This time, no matter what, she couldn't drag him into the danger. Han Mingxi looked at her with a smile and said, "Don't be so quick to refuse. In any case, the Tianyi Pavilion is a business. As long as Junwei can afford it, we can do more than just collect information." Yi Li's heart was moved. She looked at Han Mingxi and asked, "What does Brother Han want?" Han Mingxi smiled proudly and said, "Aromatic Elegance Pavilion, I want 20% more." Yi Li said, "I thought the Tianyi Pavilion liked real money. You should know that no matter how much it is, whether it's the Su family or me, we will give it to you." Han Mingxi looked at her with grievance and said, "Junwei and I are friends. How can friends take advantage of others' difficulties?" "Friends?" Yi Li faintly raised her eyebrows and said, "The Tianyi Pavilion is not good at these things. I don't want to trouble Brother Han. Junwei, you are too polite." Han Mingxi smiled and said, "Although the Tianyi Pavilion is not good at these things, we are very familiar with the Nanzhao Imperial City. Compared to our friendship, don't you think the Tianyi Pavilion is more trustworthy?" Yi Li frowned and pondered for a while before saying, "Then I'll have to trouble Brother Han. After this, I will be responsible for the Tianyi Pavilion's losses. Of course, the Fragrant Elegance Pavilion's 20% share will remain the same." Su Qingchen reached for a book and opened it. She said, "You haven't told me yet. If people know that the corpse was found in the Saint Lady's temple, the people of Nanzhao will doubt the sanctity of the Saint Lady of Nanjiang. Most importantly, if you had another year or two, you could have pushed this matter to the Dechu State or West Hill. But now, you're not even ready to go to war with the Dechu State." The woman's eyes darkened. She stared at him gloomily and said in a low voice, "You know too much. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Su Qingchen nodded slightly. "Because you want to know more from me, don't you?" "That's right." The woman admitted directly. "If you hadn't secretly helped Anshi, she wouldn't have been able to defeat me. Since you can help her, you can help me, can't you?" Su Qingchen shook his head. "I won't help you. I'll make sure you're willing." The woman sneered. Su Qingchen put down the book again and looked at her with pity. "You're not suitable for this at all. None of the previous saints of Nanjiang are suitable. Even if you're smarter than them, you're still not as good as Princess Anshi when it comes to governing a country." A trace of anger flashed in the woman's eyes. She said coldly, "Who says I'm not suitable? You admit that I'm smarter than Anshi, don't you? You're just better at scheming than her. But a country can't be governed by scheming. What's more, you can't even do scheming. So what? At least you're in my hands now, aren't you?" The woman said proudly. Su Qingchen smiled and said nothing. Looking at Su Qingchen's calm face, the woman suddenly felt very angry. She said with hatred, "You're looking down on me." Su Qingchen frowned. "I'm not looking down on you. I just don't agree with what you're doing now." "I know. You're looking down on me." The woman screamed. "What do you know? Do you know what kind of life Anshi has lived since she was a child? What kind of life I've lived since I was a child? Why? Why is she born as the crown princess and the crown princess? Why does everything belong to her? You're the saint of Nanjiang. You're also respected by tens of thousands of people, Su Qingchen said. Respected by tens of thousands of people. I haven't seen my mother since I was 3 years old. I've been alone since I was 5 years old. He was not allowed to talk to the maids, not allowed to go out to play, not allowed to cry, not allowed to see outsiders, and not even allowed to be tempted. When I'm 28, I still have to go to that damn Holy Land. Who wants to go to that damn place? Nanzhao is mine. Everything is mine. The woman screamed as if she had suddenly broken down. Su Qingchen shook his head. The life of the saint of Nanjiang is indeed very pitiful. But I don't think that includes you. No one has ever restricted your actions, right? Otherwise, how could you have the chance to meet King Li and become enemies with Princess Anxi? Even, the new saint of Nanjiang had already appeared 2 years ago. You just killed her. The saint of Nanjiang can be 28 years old at the latest. But in fact, most saint of Nanjiang abdicate before 25. Anxi even told you this. The woman stared at him. It seems that she really trusts you. I'm friends with Princess Anxi. Humph. The breakdown just now seemed to be an illusion. Or it could be called acting. The woman regained her elegance in a moment. Good friend. I'll send the heads of your friends and your fiancé to you. With that, the woman flicked her sleeves and left. Su Qingchen frowned as he watched the stone door close again. The saint of Nanjiang was gradually losing her mind. As long as everything went according to the plan he and Princess Anxi had discussed in the past 6 months, they would definitely be able to take down the saint of Nanjiang and King Li's forces in Nanjiang without shedding a drop of blood. So now was the time to think about how to escape. Since he had achieved his goal beyond his expectations, there was no point in staying here any longer. And the later it would be, the more dangerous it would be. The stone door was pushed open from the outside again. Su Qingchen said indifferently, "Miss, is there anything else?" "Miss, it's nothing. Brother Qingchen, it's me." There was a crisp laughter at the door. Su Qingchen was startled and quickly turned to look at the door. Beside the half-opened stone door, a pretty girl in a light yellow dress was looking at him with a smile. Li. Yi Li stepped forward and looked around the stone room with a smile. "Big brother, it seems that you're doing well here." Su Qingchen looked at her with a smile and said, "Li, why are you here?" Yi Li winked at him and pointed at the half-open stone door. She smiled and said, "Come and welcome Master Qingchen." Chapter 197. Su Qingchen looked at the door thoughtfully. "There's someone else outside." Yi Li pulled Su Qingchen and smiled. "Let's not talk about this for now. Let's go. It won't be good if that woman comes back." Su Qingchen nodded. Li is right. Let's talk about it outside. For example, I suddenly have a fiancé. The smile on Yi Li's face froze. After a while, she laughed and said, "Brother Qingchen, remember to call me Chu Luyun when you go out. It's easy to be suspicious if you don't even know your fiancé's name." Su Qingchen tidied up a little and took a few things from the table. He then followed Yi Li out of the stone door. Outside the door, an heir was waiting with 2 unfamiliar shadow guards. When they saw Yi Li and Su Qingchen come out, they heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Young Master Qingchen is indeed here. Miss, let's go out of the palace." "How's that woman?" An heir said, "Princess Anxi brought people to the Saint's Hall according to our information. With those corpses, that woman will definitely have her eyes on her because of Princess Anxi. They must be waiting for you at the Saint Lady's Hall." Yi Li nodded in satisfaction. "What about the palace?" An heir said, "Young Master Han will create chaos in the palace, and we can take the opportunity to leave." Yi Li nodded. I hope Han Mingxi is reliable this time. An heir lowered his head and laughed. Young Master Han asked San to pass the message. I guarantee that he won't disappoint you. I hope so. The two shadow guards protected Su Qingchen while an heir and Yili stood in front and behind. Sure enough, as they had expected, a long tunnel connected the Imperial Palace and the Sacred Maiden Hall. Although the mountain behind the Imperial Palace was not completely hollowed out like the Lui tribe, there were still a few stone rooms connected to the tunnel. Su Qingchen was under house arrest in one of them. With Yili and the others leading the way, the group naturally quickly arrived at the exit of the Imperial Palace. Su Qingchen frowned and asked, "Where is the exit?" An heir said with some regret, "It's in the Nanzhao King's bedroom." That saintess of the southern wilderness is so crazy, yet Nanzhao King still dares to build a secret passage in his bedroom. Isn't he afraid of being killed by the saintess of the southern wilderness? Su Qingchen wasn't surprised and said faintly, "Under normal circumstances, Southern Border's Holy Maiden will be absolutely loyal to Nanzhao King." An heir was puzzled, "Then what's going on now?" Yili interrupted, "Let's talk about it when we get back." An heir hurriedly complied and walked forward to carefully push open the mechanism of the secret passage. The heavy boulder was moved away, and an empty palace appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When the group of 5 walked out, an heir then sealed the mechanism of the secret passage again. The 2 secret guards were the first to dash out, just in time to pull in the 2 guards at the door who had come to investigate after hearing the commotion. The 2 guards didn't even have time to groan before they quietly fell to the ground. Su Qingchen glanced at Yili, who had a calm expression, and his eyes moved slightly. He reached out and pulled Yili to his side. Yili raised her head and smiled faintly at him, "Big brother, let's go out quickly." Su Qingchen nodded. Coming out of Nanzhao King's gorgeous bedroom, they didn't encounter too many guards along the way. A few guards were also taken care of by the 2 shadow guards and an heir. Because the route had been planned in advance, it didn't take much effort for the group to get out of the palace and stand at the secret place that Han Mingxi had prepared for them in advance. Junwei. This young master is back. Why haven't you come out to greet me? The group didn't have time to sit down to drink water and catch their breath. Han Mingxi's incomparably coquettish voice sounded outside the courtyard. Just as he turned around, a shadow fell from the top of the wall and pounced in the direction of Yili, young Master Han. And San, who was following behind him, broke out in cold sweat and hurriedly called out. Su Qingchen and an heir beside Yili also stepped forward to block Han Mingxi's figure. Su Qingchen's smile was warm and cold. "Young Master Han, what are you doing?" Only then did Han Mingxi see clearly that the person standing beside Su Qingchen wasn't his beloved younger brother Junwei, but a delicate young girl wearing a light yellow robe. This. Yili hurriedly retreated behind Su Qingchen, only sticking out half of her face. Big brother Qingchen, Han Mingxi saw that the young girl seemed to have been frightened by him and couldn't help but feel ashamed. He, young Master Fengyu, had dominated the Sea of Flowers for more than a decade. When had he ever done such a disrespectful thing to a beautiful young girl? In order to maintain his image at the banquet, Han Mingxi immediately put on young Master Fengyu's signature smile and raised an eyebrow behind Su Qingchen. In a gentle voice, he said, "Miss, I'm really sorry. This one is Han Mingxi. Did I scare you just now?" This humble one apologizes for his mistake. Yili hid behind Su Qingchen and said crisply, "No need. But young master, please don't do this in the future. After all, there are differences between men and women." Han Mingxi's mouth twitched. He really wasn't a lecher. He just thought that the person standing beside Su Qingchen was Junwei, okay? But then again, where did his younger brother Junwei go? Shuijing. Where did my younger brother Junwei go? You're all here. Why is he missing? Yili couldn't help but look up at the sky. Who's your younger brother? An heir's face darkened. He silently looked at Han Mingxi's unforgiving expression and said, "Young master didn't say that he would come here." Han Mingxi was dissatisfied. Why didn't Jun Wei come here? An heir said, "This is the place that young master asked young master Han to prepare for young master Su." Han Mingxi glanced at the elegant young master Qingqin unhappily. He didn't know why he felt a little sour in his heart. He said sadly, "But I prepared it for Jun Wei." An heir couldn't help but roll his eyes. "Our young master has a place to live." Han Mingxi curled his lips and said, "How can the place you live be more comfortable than the place I prepared? If I knew that Jun Wei didn't want to live here, I wouldn't have bothered so much." After saying that, he didn't forget to glare at Su Qingqin. Su Qingqin saw this and smiled faintly. "Thank you for your trouble, young master Han." Han Mingxi snorted and waved the folding fan in his hand. "Seeing that you are Jun Wei's elder brother, this young master won't argue with you. Where is Jun Wei? Since he isn't with us or you, where is he now?" An heir quickly glanced at Yili and said, "When we came back, young master Chu received a message and left first. He said that he had something to deal with first. He will come back later and we will meet." "I see." Han Mingxi was skeptical. Perhaps it was because an heir's slightly serious face was very trustworthy, but in the end, Han Mingxi snorted and left. Seeing Han Mingxi disappear in the yard, Su Qingqin turned around and smiled at Yili. "Little sister, it seems that many things have happened on your way to Nanjiang." Yili smiled at Su Qingqin to please him. With Su Qingqin's intelligence, it wasn't difficult for him to guess that Chu Junwei and Chu Luyun were the same person. Su Qingqin smiled at Yili's uneasy look and nodded. "It just so happens that you and Big Brother haven't seen each other for almost a year. Let's go in and have a chat." Yili helplessly blinked and moved aside. She softly said, "Big Brother, please." "Big Brother, you also know Sickly Scholar?" Yili asked. Although Sickly Scholar was famous, he was a member of the Jianghu. Yili was curious that Su Qingqin knew this person. Su Qingqin looked at her indifferently. "Ling Taihan, the first master of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, is my friend." Yili was speechless. She looked up at the sky silently in her heart. She was just thinking about how to scheme against Sickly Scholar, but Sickly Scholar was still a dangerous existence. "Big Brother, if I do something to Sickly Scholar, it won't affect your friendship with Pavilion Master Ling, right?" Su Qingqin raised his eyebrows and said, "What do you want to do to him?" Yili frowned and told him about the Biluo flower in detail. After listening to her, Su Qingqin was silent for a moment before saying, "So, you're worried that he will harm Prince Ding if he gets the Biluo flower, so you want to get rid of this hidden danger first. At the same time, you think that the Biluo flower may be helpful to Prince Ding's illness, so you want to get the Biluo flower too. You're really considerate of Mo Xiuyao. It's obvious that you really think of yourself as the future princess consort. Father and uncle have always been worried that you're too calm, but I'm sure they don't want to see you place too much importance on Prince Ding." Hearing Su Qingqin say this, Yili suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. "Big Brother, what are you saying? Mo Xiuyao has always been good to me. Since I'm already married to him, I naturally want him to be well. Could it be that Big Brother wants him to die quickly and your poor cousin to become a widow?" Seeing Yili's forceful and confident appearance, Su Qingqin smiled. He coughed lightly and said, "Forget it. You should be careful about Sickly Scholar. As for Ling Taihan, I'll talk to him. I won't let the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce make trouble for you." "Thank you, Big Brother." Yili smiled. Su Qingchen looked at her with a half-smile and said, "No need to thank me, cousinly, Let's talk about my fiancé now." "That's right, I've already sent a pigeon back to the capital to inform the people who should be informed." "Aw. Cousin. How can you be like this?" "No, how can you be so fast?" Yili felt a headache when she thought about how many letters she would receive because of this matter and how she would be lectured by her eldest and second uncles in the future. Su Qingchen smiled and said, "Actually, when I heard that my fiancé was coming to Nanzhao, I had someone send a letter back." "Or do you think that Big Brother won't be able to send a letter outside because he's under house arrest? There should be a reply in at most 5 days. Luyun Mimi." Yili couldn't help but want to hold her head and groan. Big Brother was really too bad. Capital. Prince, a secret letter from Yunzhou. In the study, Chief Steward Mo quickly walked in with a letter sealed with a black flame. Mo Xiuyao, who was sitting in the study reading, suddenly raised his head. He took the letter from Chief Steward Mo's hands and quickly read it. His expression gradually became serious. The air pressure in the study seemed to freeze. Chief Steward Mo asked worriedly, "Prince?" Mo Xiuyao lowered his head and paused slightly. The letter in his hand had been unconsciously crumpled into a ball. Closing his eyes slightly to calm the shock and anger in his heart, Mo Xiuyao refolded the ball of paper in his hand and said in a heavy voice, "Tell Feng Jiao to come over, and ask Sir Shen to come over as well. Prepare, I will enter the palace in a moment." Chief Steward Mo frowned. Ever since the Wang Fei's incident, the prince had not entered the palace. It seemed that the news from Yunzhou was something major. Even though he was worried, Chief Steward Mo could only respond in a low voice to the prince's orders, "This subordinate will go now." A short while later, Feng Jiao and Shenyang appeared at the door of the study. Feng Jiao raised an eyebrow and said with a smile, "What orders does Prince have?" Mo Xiuyao reached out and handed over the slightly crumpled letter. He said in a heavy voice, "Take a look." Feng Jiao's handsome brows rose slightly. He understood Mo Xiuyao and naturally understood the meaning of his expression and tone. He did not speak further and took the letter to sit down on the side. "From Yunzhou. Is this old Mr. Qingyun's handwriting?" Mo Xiuyao nodded silently. Feng Jiao's expression also became slightly serious. He had originally hoped that the Su family would have someone knowledgeable to help translate what Yili had sent back. He hadn't thought that it would alarm Mr. Qingyun. Anything that could attract the attention of this old mister was not a small matter. Feng Jiao sat on the side and read the letter. Shenyang looked strangely at Mo Xiuyao and asked, "Prince, is something the matter? Or are you not feeling well?" Shenyang was a doctor and did not like to ask about these things. Chapter 199. Mo Xiuyao shook his head and said, "Originally, Mr. Shen was supposed to depart for Xiling in a few days, but now I'm afraid I'll have to ask Mr. Shen to postpone it." Shenyang frowned and said, "Prince's plan has changed." Mo Xiuyao sighed and said, "It's too late. Mr. Shen, I need to make a trip to Nanjiang." "What?" Shenyang said loudly. Even Feng Jiao, who was sitting at the side, could not help but be stunned and frown worriedly. Shenyang did not give Mo Xiuyao a chance to speak at all. He angrily shouted at Mo Xiuyao, "Prince, are you joking? Your body is much better than last winter, but don't forget that this is only in comparison to last winter. Nanjiang's climate is wet and rainy, it's not suitable for your body at all. And, you know it yourself, the cold poison in your body has already gone out of control last winter. Although you try to suppress it, your body will only get worse and worse. If you change places rashly, the cold poison may even go out of control again." Feng Jiao was somewhat puzzled. The warm climate in Nanjiang, isn't it more suitable for Prince's body? Shenyang rolled his eyes in annoyance. If that's the case, why did we go through so much trouble for so many years? Wouldn't it be better to just let Prince go to Nanjiang to recuperate? Mr. Shen, Mo Xiaoyao frowned and looked at Shenyang seriously and said in a low voice, I must go. The low and firm voice announced the speaker's unwavering will. Reason. Shenyang said angrily, Prince, please give me a reason why you don't care about your own life. As a doctor, I at least have the right to know why my patients are sending themselves to their deaths. Mo Xiaoyao sighed. He was full of respect for this elder who had pulled him back from the road to the netherworld again and again. Unfortunately, he had to go against his wishes, because, if I don't go, we can only atone for our sins with our deaths in the future. Shenyang was shocked. For Mo Xiaoyao to say such words, the matter was not something he could stop, or he could not stop it at all. Shenyang seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant and said sadly, Prince, even if you go to Nanjiang, with your current body, there is nothing you can do. The body that was affected by the cold poison was extremely sensitive to changes in the weather. The north was dry, even if it was not rainy, Mo Xiaoyao's body would be extremely weak and ache, not to mention the rainy south. Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't have it any better in the past than in the winter. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes. I know you have a way. Mr. Shen, I can't go to Nanjiang like this. I want to stand up and appear in southern border in one piece. Do you understand? To Nanjiang. Feng Zhiyao also suddenly stood up and said, Prince, things have not reached that stage yet. Why don't we go to Nanjiang first, and then, we can talk about it when the time comes. Mo Xiaoyao looked at him calmly and said, You should know that if I can't go to Nanjiang, it will be too late when things really reach that stage. Feng Zhiyao lowered his head and gripped the letter in his hand, speechless. Shenyang snorted and said, I don't care what stage things have reached, there is no way. I am a doctor, not an assassin, I will not let you do that. Mo Xiaoyao ignored him and said lightly to Feng Zhiyao, Go and prepare, I will go to the palace. Feng Zhiyao looked at him and did not know what to say for a long time. After a long time, he could only say in a low voice, Yes, Prince. Mo Xiaoyao turned his hand and the wheelchair moved out of the door. When he passed by Shenyang, he said lightly, Mr. Shen, I want to see the medicine when I come back. I won't give it to you. Shenyang finally abandoned the gentleness of a doctor and shouted loudly. Unfortunately, the person he was shouting at had already gone out. Feng Zhiyao looked at Shenyang, who was so angry that his face was red, and followed him out with the letter in his hand. Shenyang was so angry that he could only stare blankly in the study. After a long time, he shouted, Are the men of the Mo family sick? Can't this world live without you? Feng Zhiyao looked back at the study and quickly caught up with Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao asked indifferently, What do you want to say? Feng Zhiyao was stunned for a moment, and could only shake his head and say, I have nothing to say. Prince, please allow Feng San to do as he pleases. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, You need to stay and deal with the matters in the capital. Feng Zhiyao raised his eyebrows, and there was a heroic spirit between his brows that he didn't usually have. Prince, Feng San is a soldier. His life's ambition is to move unhindered on the battlefield, not to control the shadow guard and gather intelligence. Mo Xiaoyao was stunned, and he turned back to look at Feng Zhiyao. Too much time had passed, and he had somewhat forgotten. When they were still naughty children, the red-clothed Feng Zhiyao stood in front of him and said that in the future, he would become a peerless general who would win every battle. Then, Feng Zhiyao gave up the Feng family's luxurious life at the age of 13, and followed him through life and death. Perhaps if it were not for that matter back then, Feng Xiao would have already become a famous general of his generation as he wished, and would not have been forced to stay in the capital like he was now, using the image of a dissolute and unruly young master to appear in front of the world, just to conceal his identity as the commander of the hidden guards. After a long time, Mo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, "All right, if they really, then they should know about your relationship with the Ding Palace. I will make other arrangements for the Shadow Guard." At that time, Feng Xiao had anonymously followed him on the battlefield. Not many people knew about it, but it wasn't that there weren't any. Feng Xiao was overjoyed. "Thank you, Prince." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and replied, "I should be the one thanking you. Also, send someone to send a letter to Li on a fast horse. Be careful of Shu Manlin." Nanzhao capital Yili helplessly looked at the hostile Han Mingxi and the indifferent Su Qingchen in front of her. "Young Master Han." Han Mingxi snorted and turned his face to Yili with a smile. "Luyan Mimi, there's no need to be so polite. Since you also know Jun Wei, you can just call me Brother Mingxi." Yili looked at him speechlessly and swallowed back the words she wanted to say. Han Mingxi saw that the little beauty was ignoring him and shrugged his shoulders regretfully. He looked at Yili and said, "Speaking of which, Luyan Mimi and Jun Wei are really similar. Actually, Jun Wei isn't young Master Qingchen's younger brother, but Luyan Mimi's brother, right? Aren't both of you surnamed Chu?" Yili silently wiped her sweat in her heart. Brother Qingchen is really Jun Wei's elder brother. Han Mingxi rolled his eyes and blinked innocently at Yili. "Then Jun Wei's name is definitely not real? Luyan Mimi, can you tell Big Brother? What is Jun Wei's name?" Yili's heart was filled with bitterness. She secretly regretted asking Han Mingxi for help in the first place. She looked pleadingly at Su Qingchen, who was leisurely drinking tea. Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said indifferently, "Su Qinglu." "Qinglu. Good name. It's very compatible with Jun Wei. Unlike some people. It's a waste of a good name." "No. Su Qinglu is not one of the 5 young masters of the Su family," Han Mingxi murmured. He quickly reacted and glared fiercely at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said, "Who told you that he's one of the 5 sons of the Su family?" Han Mingxi lowered his head and thought. He didn't think so. After thinking for a moment, he raised his head and looked at Su Qingchen with a strange and conflicted expression. If you looked carefully, you could see a little bit of contempt. Yili looked at Han Mingxi helplessly. "What are you thinking of now?" Everything was done by the Shadow Guard and the Tianyi Pavilion. Princess Anqi walked to the side and sat down. She glared at Su Qingchen and said with dissatisfaction, "You didn't do anything, but you made a mess in the palace. Father just summoned me to the palace to question me. He suspects that I did it." She was prepared to do that, but didn't someone else beat her to it? Why did father still suspect her? Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said, "You know that the king of Nanzhao suspects you. Why did you still come here?" Princess Anqi raised her eyebrows disdainfully and said, "Those good-for-nothings can only keep up with me if I want them to. I don't want them to be unable to keep up with me even if they break their legs." "Princess, why are you in such a hurry to come here?" Su Qingchen asked. Yili watched from the side and sighed in her heart. Princess Anqi came here in such a hurry because she was worried about her brother's safety. But he just asked her indifferently, "Why are you here?" Did he expect the girl to say that she was worried about his safety? Princess Anqi was stunned. She glanced at Yili and raised her eyebrows, saying, "Can't I come here for no reason? This princess has to come and see if my friend and military advisor is still alive." Su Qingchen shook his head and said, "I also have something to talk to you about. Since you're here, I don't need to send people to the princess mansion to look for you." Princess Anshi frowned and looked at Su Qingchen, saying, "You're not going back to the princess mansion." She hesitated and glanced at Yi Li, saying, "Miss Chu is living in my mansion now. You can take care of her if you go back with her. Isn't it convenient for us to discuss anything?" Yi Li thought for a while and said before Su Qingchen spoke, "Princess, I'm really sorry that I lied to you before." Princess Anshi frowned in confusion. Yi Li said in a low voice, that Actually, Lu Yun is not a weak woman who can't even trust a chicken. Today, she and Lin Han entered the palace to save me. I was afraid that you would be suspicious, so I pretended that I didn't know anything." Su Qingchen said indifferently. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and glared at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen was as still as a mountain. Princess Anshi looked at him strangely. She looked at Yi Li and smiled, saying, "That's nothing. It's rare to see a girl from the Central Plains who is good at both the pen and the sword like Miss Chu. Miss Chu did it for Qingchen's safety. I'm not such a petty person." Yi Li said with a smile, "Thank you, Princess." The three of them moved to the study. Although Princess Anshi had some doubts about Yi Li's existence, she trusted Su Qingchen and didn't ask any more questions. After all, the delicate girl in front of her had brought someone all the way to Nanzhao and successfully tricked her into saving Su Qingchen. Naturally, she wasn't an ordinary person. Princess Anshi looked at Yi Li with a complicated gaze. Yi Li could only smile bitterly in her heart. She glared at Su Qingchen secretly and gave him a look that said, "Explain it to me later." Su Qingchen smiled indifferently and didn't say anything. After entering the study and sitting down, Princess Anshi quickly put the previous private matter to the back of her mind and became serious and focused. Su Qingchen asked, "Did you get the commander's seal?" Princess Anshi shook her head in shame, saying, "I'm sorry, Qingchen. The place where we found the commander's seal was just a cover. It wasn't there at all." Su Qingchen frowned slightly, saying, "Logically speaking, Shu Manlin shouldn't know that we're looking for the commander's seal. No outsider should know where the real commander's seal is. Why did she hide the military book so well and make it look like a trap for us?" Princess Anshi shook her head, saying, "Not many people on our side know about it. I can guarantee that they're all trustworthy." Su Qingchen shook her head, "Of course we can trust your people. But this time, Anshi, don't you think there's something strange about it? In the past 6 months, it seems that every time we're about to catch Shu Manlin's fatal mistake, she'll escape first." Princess Anshi said angrily, "It's all because of father. Father is always partial to Shu Manlin for no reason. He says she's the saintess of Nanjiang and can't do those things. He says you're trying to sow discord between us. The most ridiculous thing is that it's a misunderstanding. Father is getting more and more muddle-headed these years." Chapter 201. Su Qingchen asked thoughtfully, "Is the king of Nanzhao really senile?" Princess Anshi was startled. She looked sideways at Su Qingchen and asked, "What do you mean?" Su Qingchen said lightly, "We all thought that the king of Nanzhao was biased towards Shu Manlin, but this time, I was drugged and unconscious after I was caught that day. But I remember that I fainted around the end of the afternoon and woke up in the stone room around the quarter of the afternoon. You had already sent people to watch the Saint Ladies' Hall that day, so they could only go back through the palace. But the king of Nanzhao was usually resting in his bedroom during that time. Even if he wasn't there, the guards at the entrance of the secret passage weren't just for show. After that, Anshi, did you hear any rumors about this after you entered the palace?" Princess Anshi thought for a moment and shook her head, "No. When I reported your disappearance to my father, he was very worried and said he would send people to help me find you. But I refused." Su Qingchen smiled faintly, how could the king of Nanzhao not know what happened in his bedroom? Especially when he clearly has people guarding that secret passage at all times. Princess Anqi was startled for a long time. She looked up at Su Qingchen with disbelief and hesitation. You mean that my father wasn't deceived by Xu Manlin at all, and he was biased towards Xu Manlin and helping her? Why? I'm my father's daughter, the crown princess of Nanzhao. I've never done anything unworthy of my status. Maybe it's because the princess is too worthy of your status. Yili raised her eyebrows and said softly. Princess Anqi glanced at her sharply. What do you mean, Miss Chu? Yili blinked and looked at Princess Anqi. There's a saying in the Central Plains. I don't know if the princess has heard of it before. Princess Anqi looked at her silently. Yili said in a low voice, high merit overshadows the ruler. The princess and the king of Nanzhao are naturally father and daughter, but, although the princess calls the king of Nanzhao father, in my opinion, he should be the king's father. In the royal family, he should be the king first, then the father. And the princess is the same. She should be the subject first, then the daughter. These days in Nanzhao's capital, I've heard quite a bit of the princess' reputation. The people of Nanzhao praise the princess as a wise and far-sighted crown princess. Even a person of the Central Plains like me, who has just arrived in Nanzhao, has such an impression, let alone the common people of Nanjiang who have been graced by the princess. Princess Anqi paled and said in a trembling voice, Are you saying that my father is afraid of me? Is that why you supported Xu Manlin to go against me and suppress me? Yili sighed softly and looked at Princess Anqi with pity. Your Highness, you must have read some history books of the Central Plains. Let's not talk about the distant ones, let's talk about the recent ones. Although your Highness is in the southern border, I'm sure you have some understanding of the situation in King Ding's residence. Princess Anqi's pale lips trembled as she looked at Su Qingchen for help. Su Qingchen sighed softly. Anqi. I once reminded you that going too far is as bad as not going far enough. Princess Anqi bit her lip and lowered her head in silence. Going too far was as bad as falling short. He had said this to her when they first met 4 years ago. But she didn't really take it to heart. Because she truly wanted the good of Nanzhao. She could tell anyone with a clear conscience that she never had any selfish motives. She thought that as long as she worked hard to share her father's burdens, her father would be happy. She thought that as long as Nanzhao became rich and powerful, and the common people lived in peace, her sister Xixia wouldn't have to go through a political marriage. But in the end, Xixia went to Dechu State to hide her identity and marry a man as a concubine. Her father had been secretly plotting how to keep her in check. Then all her efforts over the years, what were the things she had done? Looking at Princess Anqi's devastated expression, Yili and Su Qingchen could only look at her silently. Such a blow was not something that could be resolved with a few words of comfort. Princess Anqi had to figure it out herself. The atmosphere in the study was solemn. Princess Anqi sat in her chair with her head lowered. Although nothing could be seen from her appearance, she was gripping the armrest so tightly that her fingers turned white. It was obvious that she was not calm at all. Yili praised in her heart. At least Princess Anqi knew how to control herself. This was rare, especially among women. After a long while, Princess Anqi looked up and broke the silence in the study. If I give up everything now, will father, Anqi? Su Qingchen frowned and shook his head. I don't know what the king of Nanzhao will do, but Xu Manlin. Anqi, Xu Manlin hates you. Do you understand? She won't let you go at all. And she will definitely drag Nanzhao into hell. Is this what you want to see? Anqi looked at him in confusion. I know she hates me. At most, I'll go to the Central Plains, Xiling, or the northern tribes. But you said. What do you think she wants the commander's seal for? She wants to mobilize the guards of the capital to besiege your residence. I've talked to her a few times. She is very ambitious, but she doesn't have the strength to match her ambition, Su Qingchen said. Princess Anqi's expression was solemn. She looked at Su Qingchen hesitantly. You mean, she wants to, Su Qingchen said, ask Lu Yun what she did at the border between Nanzhao and the Dechu state. Princess Anqi turned to Yili. Yili said in a low voice, on our way to Nanjiang, we found a man-made snake valley not far from Shattered Snow Pass. Hidden behind the Snake Valley was a very large weapon refinery. All the weapons inside were the weapons used by the Dechu state soldiers. But I found some other things inside. Also, the one who controls this weapon refinery is the chief of the Luoi tribe, Lu Jiang. Man-made Snake Valley. She wants to make Dechu state's weapons? What does she want to do? Princess Anqi said angrily. The people of Nanjiang liked snakes, but they didn't like Nanjiang becoming a place full of poisonous snakes. So when Mo Xiuyao set fire to the Snake Valley, it didn't arouse too much hatred from the people of Nanjiang. She didn't expect that in less than 10 years, another Snake Valley would appear in Nanjiang. As for making weapons from another country in Nanjiang, that crossed Princess Anqi's bottom line. Who knew if these weapons would be used against the people of Nanjiang one day? In Princess Anqi's eyes, this was treason. Did royal father know all of this? Was he kept in the dark by Shu Manlin, or was he pretending not to know? Or did royal father agree to Shu Manlin's plan? Su Qingchen said, isn't it obvious? King Li helped the Saintess of Nanzhao obtain Nanzhao. In return, Shu Manlin will help King Li obtain the Chu state. Idiot! Princess Anqi scolded. Helping King Li obtain the Chu state was easier said than done. How big of a price would it have to pay? Not to mention the losses Nanzhao would suffer if they failed. Even if they succeeded, what benefits would Nanzhao receive? At that time, Nanzhao would have to rely on Mo Jingli, just like Nanjiang hundreds of years ago. I want to go to the palace and ask royal father. Princess Anqi said in unison. Chapter 202. Anqi. Su Qingchen looked at her disapprovingly. Princess Anqi looked back at the two and said in a low voice, you don't have to persuade me. Qingchen. I don't know why you came to Nanzhao, but if it wasn't for you, I would have been tricked by Shu Manlin long ago. So, I still have to thank you. You are outsiders and this is the capital of Nanzhao. It may not be difficult for you to escape unscathed, but if father really decides to fall out with us, you won't be able to hold on for long. Leave Nanzhao as soon as possible. I'll do what I have to do. Su Qingchen said, is it something you should do as the crown princess of Nanjiang to throw yourself into a trap? Princess Anqi smiled bitterly. The title of crown princess was bestowed by father. If father is determined to side with Shu Manlin, even 10 crown princesses won't be able to do anything. I must go and have a talk with father. Looking at Princess Anqi's resolute expression, the two knew they couldn't persuade her. Su Qingchen said in a low voice, Anqi, take care. Anqi smiled and said, don't worry. I'm father's only daughter now. He won't kill me. Seeing Princess Anqi's figure disappear at the door, Yili sighed and asked Su Qingchen, brother, aren't you moved at all? Princess Anqi is the most special woman I've ever seen. Su Qingchen glanced at her indifferently and said, what nonsense are you talking about? Princess Anqi and I are friends. Yili blinked. Then why didn't you let me tell Princess Anqi the truth? That means you know it in your heart, right? Su Qingchen looked at her angrily. Do you spend all your time thinking about these things? It's impossible to begin with. Why do you have to worry about it? Yili nodded. I understand. Princess Anshi is a proud woman. She knows you have a fiancé, so she won't have any thoughts about you in the future. But brother, you haven't been using this method to block your luck in love all these years, have you? Let me say this first, I was in the wrong this time. Don't even think about using me as a shield in the future. Su Qingchen raised his hand and threw a booklet to Yili. Yili caught it and looked at the handwriting on it. It was a report from the Tianyi Pavilion on the situation in the capital of Nanzhao. Her heart sank. Brother, will Princess Anshi be all right? Su Qingchen shook his head and said, even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. Princess Xixia is already a dead person. Anshi is indeed the only daughter of the Nanzhao king. Once something happens to Anshi, Nanzhao can only be handed over to the side branch of the imperial family to inherit, and the king of Nanzhao is not very prestigious. It is very likely that he will be removed from the throne because there is no successor. Yili raised her eyebrows in surprise. There's such a rule. Nanjiang is different from our central plains. Daughters can also inherit the throne, but there is no such thing as adoption. If there is no heir, the people of Nanjiang will think that because the king of Nanzhao is not protected by the gods, he is unable to protect his people, so it is natural for him to abdicate. Yili nodded. It is good that there is no danger. We can make other plans in the future. Mississippi, an heir appeared at the door. What is it? Just now, the Tianyi Pavilion sent news that Master Liang can't take it anymore. Sickly Scholar took Master Liang to the place where the treasure is hidden. Young Master Han also rushed over. An heir said in a low voice. Damn it, why is he joining in the fun? Why is everything happening at the same time? Yili cursed in a low voice. She raised her head and ordered, you and an heir get ready. We will go immediately. Yes. An heir quickly disappeared at the door. Yili turned to Su Qingchen and said, brother, I have to go first. If there is anything you need, just tell the Shadow Guard to do it. Since Princess Anshi said so, shouldn't you leave Nanzhao as soon as possible? Su Qingchen shook his head. I still have some things to figure out. I am living here now. You be careful. Yili nodded. Brother, be careful too. Yili led an heir to quickly follow the marks left by the Tianyi Pavilion and the Shadow Guard. Fortunately, Nanjiang was not particularly vast. The area near the capital was naturally not very large. After riding for more than 4 hours, they finally found the address mentioned in the message from the Tianyi Pavilion. They found the mark left by Han Mingxi at the foot of the mountain. Young master, it is here. They have entered the mountain. Yili nodded. She turned and ordered, let's go separately. An heir objected. No, it is too dangerous for young master to go alone. Yili was helpless. An heir, come with me. An heir, follow secretly. Yes. She led an heir all the way into the mountain following the mark left by Han Mingxi. The mountain forests of Nanjiang were more humid than the north. There were all kinds of poisonous insects and plants. Fortunately, this was not a problem for the two. They went all the way in the direction of the mark. Young master, look ahead. An heir held her weapon in her hand and stared ahead vigilantly. Several men wearing the Tianyi Pavilion's uniform were lying at the foot of the small hill in front of them. The blood from their wounds had already coagulated. It was obvious that they had been dead for a long time. Yili furrowed her brows. She tilted her head and listened carefully to the surroundings. She then pointed in another direction and said, let's go that way. Anson took the lead and walked in front. Along the way, they saw some corpses of the Tianyi Pavilion. An heir said in a low voice, there are no people from our side. Yili frowned deeply and kept walking forward. After walking for more than an hour, they finally heard the faint sound of weapons clashing and people talking in front of them. The two looked at each other and carefully sneaked over. At the entrance of a cave, Sickly Scholar looked at the person sitting on the ground with a smug smile and said with a malicious smile, "Han Mingxi, do you really think that I don't dare to touch you because I'm afraid of your big brother? Your Tianyi Pavilion has been against me all along the way. I'm being polite by sparing your life until now, right?" Han Mingxi fell to the ground awkwardly. The folding fan with famous inscriptions that he usually pretended to be elegant had been thrown to the side in the dust. He coughed twice and said, "If that's the case, why don't you kill me?" "Huh, don't worry. You've worked so hard for Chu Junwei. I should let you see him before you die. Isn't that right? Don't worry. When the time comes, I'll send him down to accompany you." Sickly Scholar sneered and said, "That guy surnamed Chu is really bold. He hasn't been in the Jianghu before, so he doesn't know my reputation. Don't you know Han Mingxi? When have I ever shared my things with others? He actually dared to ask me for a reward and even wanted the Biluo flower. Ha! Cough cough. Now that the Biluo flower is here, I'd like to see whether you, a friend he's only known for a few days, or the priceless treasure is more important in his eyes." "Boring," Han Mingxi whispered disdainfully. Sickly Scholar was obviously very proud. He sneered and said, "Enjoy the rest of your time. You'd better pray that Chu Junwei really thinks you're important and can come here within 2 hours. Otherwise, I can only miss this good show and return your body to him." Yili quietly looked at the scene not far away and pondered with lowered eyebrows. After a while, Ansan returned to her side and whispered, "There's no ambush around." Yili nodded and stood up to walk outside. Ansan wanted to reach out and pull her back, but it was too late. Seeing Yili's back make a gesture to hide, Ansan could only hide again. She looked at an heir who was hiding on the other side and then stared at the grass outside the cave. Chapter 203. Seeing Yili leisurely walk over with her hands behind her back, Sickly Scholar's eyes flashed. "You really came." Yili calmly stepped forward. Her gaze swept over Han Mingxi, then slowly landed on Sickly Scholar. She smiled and said, "Third Master, it's not a good habit to burn bridges after crossing the river." Sickly Scholar narrowed his eyes and snorted. "Burning bridges after crossing the river? You can only blame yourself for being too greedy." Yili helplessly hit her palm with her folding fan and sighed. "This world is really not what it used to be. Forget it, I'll just take it that I'm unlucky this time. Tell me, what do you want? No matter what, how about letting Han Mingxi go first? I know you're not afraid of Han Mingyue, but I think Ling Tai Han wouldn't want you to provoke the Tianyi Pavilion. You, how dare you threaten me with Big Brother?" Yili waved the folding fan in her hand and said with a smile, "No, it just so happens that I have an elder brother who is Pavilion Master Ling's best friend. What's more, I told him before coming here. If something happens to us here, he'll naturally go home and report my death. Of course, he won't forget to inform young Master Mingyue and Pavilion Master Ling. What do you think? When it comes to making enemies, it's better to make as few as possible, right?" Sickly Scholar looked at Han Mingxi on the ground, then looked at Yili and said, "All right. Han Mingxi can go. You stay." Yili nodded. "No problem." Han Mingxi sat on the ground and didn't move. Yili frowned and asked, "What's wrong? Are you seriously injured?" Han Mingxi snorted and frowned. The cloth on his left leg was black. Obviously, he was seriously injured. Yili took 2 steps forward and asked with concern, "Mingxi, are you all right?" Han Mingxi looked up and shook his head. "I'm fine. Junwei, you don't have to worry about me. Let's go. Yili shook her head and smiled. You got into trouble with Sickly Scholar because of me. How can I leave you behind? Mingxi, it was wrong of me to lie to you before. You should call me by my real name. The name Junwei. I'm actually not too used to it. Han Mingxi's face flashed with a strange color. He nodded and said, I know. Yili smiled and said, let me help you up. Han Mingxi nodded and raised his hand to take Yili's outstretched hand. No. The change seemed to happen in an instant. Han Mingxi's hand that was about to hold Yili suddenly changed. Like an eagle's claw, it grabbed Yili. At the same time, Yili leaned back. The hand that was holding the folding fan glowed with a brilliant silver light. Almost at the same time, a figure rushed out of the cave like lightning and threw himself at Yili. Yili frowned and the dagger in her hand flew out. Cough cough. The person who threw himself at Yili had the same face as Han Mingxi. But at this time, he looked particularly embarrassed. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Junwei. Junwei, are you okay? Yili pulled the person away and said coldly and angrily, I'm fine. The one who's not fine is you, idiot. The palm of the person opposite just hit him on the back. Yili raised her head and looked at the person like a knife. Young Master Mingyu, are you satisfied now? Han Mingxi. Han Mingyue had a dagger in her shoulder. Her dark red clothes were wet. He stared at the person supported by Yili, and his eyes were full of anger. Han Mingxi, you bastard, what are you doing? Who allowed you to come out? Han Mingxi leaned weakly on Yili. Yili's body was not tall to support his slender figure. Han Mingxi also looked at the man who looked almost the same as himself. He smiled provocatively and said, I already said that you can't fool Junwei if you want to pretend to be this young master with your lousy acting skills. Also, is this young master as a bastard as you? Presumptuous. Do you want to die for a person you just met a few days ago? Do you know who she is? Han Mingyue said coldly. Han Mingxi was startled. He gritted his teeth and said, no matter who she is, she's my friend. Even if I only know her for a few days, she's still better than you. At least Junwei will come to save me. You, if something happens to you, who will care about your life and death? Hearing her brother's roar, Han Mingyue was obviously stunned. She looked at the two people in front of her with a complicated expression. She quickly recovered and looked at Yili. She raised her eyebrows and said, Sister-in-law, please let go of my brother first. Han Mingxi's body stiffened. He looked down at Yili in disbelief. It was as if he wanted to see what she had to make Han Mingyue call her sister-in-law. After a long while, she sneered with difficulty. Big brother, you can't be confused after being stabbed, right? Don't go around claiming to be relatives. I don't have a second big brother. Han Mingyue sneered and pointed at Yili. Han Mingxi, open your eyes and look carefully. Is the person standing in front of you a man? Or have you been outside for so long that you can't even tell the difference between a man and a woman? Yili helped Han Mingxi to the side and sat down. Then she slowly pushed him away and looked at Han Mingxi apologetically. Brother Han Mingxi, I'm sorry I lied to you. Han Mingxi stared at her for a long time. Then he unwillingly curled his lips and said, all right, I know you're a woman. Seeing that we've gone through life and death together, you should at least tell me which sister-in-law you are, right? I don't want to hear that bastard say it. Yili looked back at Sickly Scholar, who was staring at her with hatred, and Han Mingyue, who was stupefied. She whispered, my name is Yili, Yili. Su Qingchen is your big brother. That's right, Su Qingchen is your big brother. Your third Miss Yi. You're. Han Mingxi stared at him. His expression was as uncomfortable as if he had swallowed a fly. He had seen Third Miss Yi before. The problem was, how did this handsome young man look like that sly rich young lady who pretended to be elegant? He had already sworn to stay away from that woman. Why was he still hanging around her these days? You lied to me. Han Mingxi accused. Yi Li apologized. I'm sorry. Just because you're sorry. I want compensation. I want 10% of the Fragrant Elegance Pavilion. Yi Li nodded readily. No problem. Han Mingxi narrowed his eyes and continued to raise his conditions. At least 4 bottles of new perfume every year. Yi Li hesitated for a moment but still nodded. Okay. Han Mingxi tilted his head and looked at her for a while. He seemed to be assessing whether her words were trustworthy or not. After a while, he raised his head and said proudly, since it's like this young master reluctantly forgives you for lying. I also admit that you, Yi Li, are my, Han Mingxi's, friend. Yi Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said helplessly, thank you, Brother Han, for being so magnanimous. Han Mingxi still snorted in dissatisfaction. He looked at Han Mingyue in disdain and said, see. You still have the nerve to say that you know how to make money. The Han family is really counting on you to not starve to death. Han Mingyue's face darkened. She glared at Han Mingxi and said, it's too late to talk nonsense. If you're done, then scram to the side. Han Mingxi rolled his eyes at him. Are you stupid? This woman is my friend. She's my future business partner. Why don't you try touching her? Chapter 204. Han Mingxi. Han Mingyue sternly said. This young master knows what his name is. Han Mingxi lazily leaned against the hillside and picked at his ears. Young Master Han. Have you finished reminiscing? If you don't make a move, it will be too late when the people from the Ding Kingdom's estate arrive. Sickly Scholar's voice sounded sinisterly behind him. Han Mingyue lightly snorted and casually pulled out the dagger from his shoulder and threw it to the side. The injury on his shoulder caused him to involuntarily knit his brows. He indifferently looked at Han Mingxi and said, Mingxi, stand to the side. Don't force me to make a move. Han Mingxi clenched his teeth and forcefully stood in front of Yi Li. He said, you can touch her if you want to, but you have to hit me first. Han Mingyue didn't say anything else and reached out to grab Han Mingxi's shoulder. Han Mingxi had just suffered a palm strike. Although Han Mingyue promptly withdrew her inner strength, he still suffered a serious internal injury. At this moment, his left arm was simply too weak. Moreover, he wasn't Han Mingyue's opponent to begin with. Yi Li, who was standing behind Han Mingxi, pulled the person in front of her and pushed him away. At the same time, she didn't forget to block Han Mingyue's moves. Yi Li's inner strength was lacking, but she was extremely skilled in close combat. Every move she made was not the least bit fanciful. Every time the silver dagger flashed in her hand, it would always bring about a moderate amount of blood. Han Mingyue couldn't help but frown at such a murderous fighting style. He consecutively sent out a few palm strikes and retreated several meters. I haven't seen you for almost a year. I didn't expect sister-in-law's skills to have improved so rapidly. If Yi Li was able to catch him off guard a year ago, then this time, the two of them were relying on real martial arts. Yi Li faintly frowned and said, I don't dare to accept the title of sister-in-law. Mr. Han, I did business with the Tianyi Pavilion at a clear price, but now you're selling me to someone else. Is this how you do business? Could it be that Tianyi Pavilion thrives on deceiving customers? Han Mingyue's expression was as sincere and helpless as ever. Wang Fei is still as humorous as ever. In this world, there were always many things that made people feel helpless. Even if they didn't want to do it, they still had to do it. Isn't that so? Yili raised her eyebrows and smiled. If Mo Xiaoyao were here right now, would you say that it was a misunderstanding again? Han Mingyue smiled but didn't say anything. Sickly Scholar sneered, if Mo Xiaoyao is here, he'll die with you. Yili turned to look at the restless Sickly Scholar and said with a faint smile, Third Pavilion Master, I advise you not to act rashly. If anything happens, I won't be able to explain it to Pavilion Master Ling. Moreover, the one who has a grudge against you is Mo Xiaoyao, not his wife. If you kill her, you'll at most make Mo Xiaoyao lose face. It won't hurt you at all. Yili stared at young Master Mingyu in front of her with displeasure and sneered, Young Master Mingyu, when discussing the ownership of others, shouldn't you first confirm whether you really have the ownership? Third Pavilion Master, it's best not to deal with businessmen. Look at me now. Not only did I lose money, I was also sold. Han Mingyue smiled and said, My apologies, Princess Consort. The one who took your money is Han Mingxi. He didn't give a single cent to the Tianyi Pavilion, so this time, at most, it can be considered that he used the power of the Tianyi Pavilion to take on a private job. As for whether I have the ownership, Han Mingyue raised her hand and a crisp sound broke through the air. A flame bloomed in the middle of the day. Yili tilted her head and clearly heard a large group of people rushing over from all directions. Does Princess Consort have anything to say now? Yili pursed her lips and smiled. She raised her hand and made 2 hand gestures in the air. It seems that I have no choice but to surrender. Princess Consort is a smart person. Han Mingyue looked at Yili's strange hand gestures. He didn't understand what they meant. However, he clearly sensed that the 2 pairs of eyes that were staring at him covetously had disappeared. Presumably, they were telling the people to retreat. Every time we meet, Princess Consort's courage and insight always amazes me. Yili smiled and said, Actually, you should be more shocked by my good luck. Han Mingyue's handsome eyes darkened and he stared at her vigilantly. The people of the Tianyi Pavilion gradually surrounded them. Han Mingyue stared at Yili for a long time before she gradually relaxed. Surrounded by so many people, Yili wouldn't be able to fly out even if she had wings. Moreover, with his eyesight and the information about the Sickly Scholar, how could Han Mingyue not know? Yili's qigong and internal energy were not good. Yili looked around and her expression was calm without the slightest hint of panic. Sister-in-law, Xiaoyao and I are friends. You don't want me to be rude, right? Do you want to leave by yourself or? Han Mingyue looked at Yili and smiled warmly. Chapter 205. Yili frowned and shook her head. Actually, you can completely forget that you and Mo Xiaoyao were friends. The more you mention it, the more I hate you. Han Mingyue smiled. Even if you hate me, it doesn't change the fact that Mo Xiaoyao and I were once friends and brothers. You also said that it was in the past. Yili couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Was there something wrong with Han Mingyue's brain? On one hand, he was reminiscing about their past friendship, on the other hand, he was trying his best to destroy their remaining friendship. On the other hand, he was always talking about his friendship with Mo Xiaoyao, but he never showed any mercy when he attacked. Fine, he did show mercy last time, but didn't Mo Xiaoyao also show mercy? Young Master Han, you won't make things difficult for me this time because of someone, right? Han Mingyue's expression changed slightly. He told you. Do I need to tell you? I was there at the time, okay? However, Mo Xiaoyao also promised me something afterwards. Do you want to hear it? Han Mingyue's expression stiffened slightly. He smiled faintly. I'm all ears. I'm not used to repaying evil with good. I'm guessing that Immerse Xiaoyao isn't either. That's why that was the only time. Han Mingyue forced a smile. It seems that Immerse Xiaoyao really does value sister-in-law. Then, with sister-in-law in our hands, I believe that he will still show mercy to us. Yili smiled. I hope so. Since young Master Mingyue has already revealed his trump card, why don't we take a look at my bargaining chip? Han Mingyue was slightly startled. What do you mean? Yili raised her brows and whistled sharply. Not far away, an ink-colored flower exploded in the sky outside the Tianyi Pavilion. Then, an ink-colored flame also rose into the sky from an even further place. Then, the sound of horse hooves could be heard from afar. Han Mingyue tilted her head and her expression changed. Black Cloud Cavalry. Why is Black Cloud Cavalry in the southern border? Upon hearing the name Black Cloud Cavalry, not only Han Mingyue, even Sickly Scholar and the people from the Tianyi Pavilion were shocked. Everyone knew that the Black Cloud Cavalry was the most elite force in the Ding Kingdom. The Mahist army was invincible on the battlefield, and the Black Cloud Cavalry was the vanguard of this army, breaking through formations, killing enemies, and breaking through enemy lines. If they were really surrounded by such an army, not to mention the subordinates of the Tianyi Pavilion that he had hurriedly mobilized in Nanjiang, even if the entire Tianyi Pavilion and Yanwang Chamber of Commerce worked together, they would still have no chance of winning, let alone the subordinates of the Tianyi Pavilion that he had hurriedly mobilized in Nanjiang. Yili was also surprised. She had only mobilized the Shadow Guard in the southern border, not the Black Cloud Cavalry. In reality, she didn't even know that the Black Cloud Cavalry existed in the southern border. Han Mingyue gritted her teeth and pounced on Yili. Once they were surrounded by the Black Cloud Cavalry, they wouldn't be able to break out. The only thing they could do now was to capture Yili and then escape. However, how could Yili be captured so easily? As soon as the two of them exchanged blows, Han Mingyue's clothes were torn. Fortunately, he dodged quickly and didn't get injured. If it was a normal duel, Yili's internal energy would be depleted as time passed, and she would definitely lose. However, if it was a life-and-death battle, Yili's battle awareness that had been honed on the battlefield and her techniques that had been tempered thousands of times were more useful. Moreover, Yili didn't plan to fight with him at all, even if it was just a matter of a dozen moves. The black-clothed men on horses were already in front of them, exchanging blows with the people of the Tianyi Pavilion. The Tianyi Pavilion was an intelligence organization, not an assassin organization, nor was it an escort agency or dojo. Even if the people under them knew martial arts, they wouldn't be that good. Of course, there were martial arts experts, but they were definitely in the minority. Compared to the Black Cloud Cavalry who had just returned from the battlefield with killing intent, the Tianyi Pavilion would lose in terms of aura. Moreover, the Black Cloud Cavalry had always been well trained. While they were still on their horses, they already locked onto their targets and reaped the lives of their enemies with great teamwork. Two of the Black Cloud Cavalry jumped off their horses and pounced on Han Mingyue from the left and right. Seeing this, Yili's dagger slashed out a streak of light, blocking Han Mingyue's attack and quickly retreating. Han Mingyue wanted to go forward again, but she was already firmly entangled by the two Black Cloud Cavalry and couldn't break free. Sickly Scholar who was watching from the side was also not spared. The Black Cloud Cavalry clearly knew Sickly Scholar's identity and didn't give him a chance to get close. Whips and spears were all thrown at him. An air and an sand landed next to Yili. Yili asked curiously, why would the Black Cloud Cavalry appear here? An air said in a deep voice, Princess, something has happened. The original Shadow Guard has been transferred away by Qing Chengongzi. This Black Cloud Cavalry was originally training near Yong Province and came to pick up Princess. What happened? To have the Black Cloud Cavalry in Yong Province travel hundreds of li to pick her up, Yili was shocked, Jingli. An heir nodded and said, 3 days ago, Ling Province's army suddenly attacked Yong Province. At the same time, Shattered Snow Pass was also attacked by Nan Zhao's army. In the future, if Wang Fei has any matters, just use the token to send someone to the Yanwang chamber to find me. As long as the Yama token is in my hands, third brother will definitely not make a move against Wang Fei. Yili raised her hand to catch the black iron token that Ling Taihan tossed over. She carefully put it away and said, "Many thanks to Pavilion Master." Ling Taihan bent down to pick up Sickly Scholar and said, "Since it's like this, goodbye." His handsome face couldn't help but darken. He had lost all the face he had in his life today. Yili looked at the dark-faced Han Mingxi. She rolled her eyes and said, "Brother Han Mingxi, you can take young Master Mingyue away." Han Mingxi was overjoyed. He looked at Yili gratefully. Even Han Mingyue had a look of astonishment. Yili looked at Han Mingyue with a faint smile and said indifferently, "But there are conditions." Han Mingxi didn't expect Yili to be so agreeable. He didn't care about the conditions. He wasn't Han Mingyue who loved money as much as his life. It was already a great surprise that his brother was still alive. Yili leisurely took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to Han Mingxi. "Drink it." Han Mingxi raised his brows and drank it without hesitation. Han Mingyue wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Han Mingxi smacked his lips and said in disdain, "So disgusting." Yili smiled and said, "This is a poison personally made by the divine Dr. Shen Yang. The ingredients are a secret. As for the effects, if you don't take the antidote once a month, your meridians will rupture and your entire body will be paralyzed. Because the smell is too disgusting, it's hard for people to eat it by mistake, so it's not very practical. But there will always be people who are willing to eat it, right?" Han Mingxi giggled and said, "I know Junwei won't take my life." Yili raised her brows. "Watch your brother closely. I will send someone to deliver the medicine to you once a month. Once I find out when he leaves your sight or does something he shouldn't do, I will personally make him bleed. I will let him see with his own eyes that you are bleeding all over and in so much pain that you wish you were dead." Han Mingxi nodded and laughed. "I understand. Big brother, for your only brother's life, you will be obedient, right?" Blinking his bewitching eyes, he pitifully looked at Han Mingyue. Han Mingyue gloomily stared at Yili and said, "How do I know you won't lie to me? Will you deliver the antidote on time?" Yili lightly said, "Han Mingxi is my friend." Han Mingyue sneered, "Friend? Is this how you treat your friend?" Yili lightly smiled and said, "If you can treat your brother like that, why can't I treat my friend like that? If you don't do that, I naturally won't do that. In this way, Han Mingxi won't have any problems. Isn't that the same as?" "I didn't do anything." Han Mingyue narrowed her eyes. "What if I find someone to make the antidote?" I heard that this bottle of poison was made by Mr. Chin from a small island in the Eastern Sea. There is no similar medicine in the Central Plains. If Mr. Han is so resourceful that you can find the medicine and make the antidote in a month, then I will consider myself unlucky. Anyway, the Black Cloud Cavalry has tens of thousands of people, so it shouldn't be too hard to send out a few hundred to chase someone all year round. Coincidentally, I have a Yama's decree in my hands. I don't know if Pavilion Master Ling is willing to use this Yama's decree to kill his friend who used his brother. If I'm even more unlucky, the Ding Palace has plenty of money. Don't you think so, Mr. Han?" Han Mingyue snorted and didn't say anything else. Han Mingxi didn't care at all and pushed away the sword on Han Mingyue's neck. He smiled at Yili and said, "Junwei, don't worry. I guarantee that Big Brother won't ruin your plans again. If you want to know, I will send someone to bring it to you." "So, Yi smiled and said, if you can really take care of your brother, I can forget about today's matter. But, if there is a next time. Brother Han, you won't use your please every time. I understand. Han Mingxi nodded seriously and reached out to seal Han Mingyue's pressure points to seal his internal energy. He waved his hand at Yi and pulled her away. This subordinate greets Princess. The Black Cloud Cavalry all bowed. Yi nodded, you can all stand up. What is going on with you? Seeing the fierce and awe-inspiring black-clothed cavalry, Yi praised them in her heart. As expected of the most elite army in the Dechu state. Just this aura alone wasn't something normal soldiers could compare to. Moreover, in the battle just now, the Black Cloud Cavalry had traveled a long way without any casualties. It was enough to see how strong this troop was. A strong man at the front stepped forward and said, reporting to Princess, 3 days ago, the Ling Province garrison suddenly launched an attack on Yong Province. At the same time, the Nanzhao army also began to attack Shattered Snow Pass. General Murong is guarding Shattered Snow Pass. The Nanzhao army has been attacking for a day and a night without any success. But, the Ling Province garrison has been unstoppable. I believe that they will reach Shattered Snow Pass in less than 10 days. At that time, General Murong will be attacked from both sides. Chapter 207. Does the capital know about this? The man nodded, they've already sent it to the capital. By tomorrow at the latest, the news will reach the capital. However, it will take at least half a month for the reinforcements to arrive. I'm afraid. Shattered Snow Pass won't last that long. Just now, young Master Qing Chen also ordered his subordinates to send a message to Wang Fei. The Crown Princess of Nanzhao has been placed under house arrest by the King of Nanzhao. The King of Nanzhao has decreed that the Saintess of Nanjiang will be the Saintess of Nanjiang. Young Master Su asked Wang Fei to leave Nanzhao as soon as possible. Young Master Su said, we were all fooled by the King of Nanzhao. Yi Li's expression was dignified. She nodded and asked, where did Dage go? The man said, young Master Su brought the Shadow Guard and said he had something to do. After that, he will leave Nanjiang. Yi frowned and thought for a moment, send a group to find Dage and escort him out of Nanzhao as soon as possible. If he doesn't agree, then knock him out and take him away first. The rest of you, follow me to Shattered Snow Pass as soon as possible. Yes, Wang Fei. The Black Cloud Cavalry quickly divided into 2 groups. One group of about 20 people was led by one person and the rest stayed in place to wait for orders. Yi asked, what kind of army are there near Shattered Snow Pass? The leading man looked at Yi with some surprise and replied respectfully, a few months ago, Prince did deploy some people near Yongzhou and Lingzhou. However, the emperor is very strict with the Ding Palace. It's impossible to mobilize the army on a large scale. Moreover, most of the Mahist army is also responsible for intimidating the northern tribes. Therefore, only the 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry and the 20,000 troops under Wu Qingliang in Yongzhou can play a role near Yongzhou. As soon as the battle broke out, we immediately sent a message to Wu Qingliang. If there are no accidents, he should arrive at Shattered Snow Pass tomorrow afternoon. Yi frowned for a moment and shook her head, no. Let him lead troops to reinforce the Yongzhou garrison to stop the Li King's army. There are 80,000 troops stationed at Shattered Snow Pass. As long as General Murong doesn't go out to fight with the enemy, it's not a problem to defend the city for half a month. Once Prince Li's army reaches Yonglin City and forms an encirclement with Nanzhao, even 20,000 more soldiers and horses will be useless. The leader of the group was also surprised. He quickly said, this subordinate will immediately send someone to inform Chief Commander Wu. If we travel without stopping, we will definitely be able to catch up with them before they cross the river tomorrow. After saying that, he quickly turned around and instructed someone to deliver the message. Yili rubbed the space between her eyebrows. She had a bad feeling in her heart. Pass down the order. There's no need to go back to the city. Go directly to Snow-Shattering Pass at the fastest speed. Yes. All of a sudden, the flames of war seemed to have ignited. Yili could not help but feel a little absent-minded. She raised her head and looked at the sky that was covered with dark clouds. Her heart grew heavier and heavier. Shattering snow pass on top of the sturdy and ancient mottled city walls, the soldiers stationed there gripped their swords and spears tightly and were ready for battle. Their young faces were stained with traces of exhaustion. Today, they had repelled 3 attacks from the Nanzhao army and were ready to welcome the next wave of attacks. Murong Shen was 40 years old, and his angular face had a resolute expression. Holding a long spear in his hand, he walked on top of the city gate tower. His brows, as thick as knives, were tightly furrowed. From the day he was sent to guard Snow-Shattering Pass, he knew that Snow-Shattering Pass would not be peaceful. But he did not expect that the true danger would not only come from the restless Nanzhao, but also from the interior of Dechu State, the emperor's younger brother, Prince Li. He couldn't help but think back to the anonymous letter he received when he left the capital. There were only 4 simple words on it: "Be careful of Ling Zhou." So this was what it meant. The other party had long known that Prince Li had bad intentions, but unfortunately, he did not attract enough attention. Or rather, the circumstances did not allow him to pay attention. The emperor needed him to guard the border, but because he had once competed with the previous Prince Ding, he was not willing to give him enough military power. The local officials also restricted him at every turn. And now, even though he knew that once Prince Li captured Yongzhou and formed an encirclement around Snow-Shattering Pass, he had no way to retreat. Because in front of Snow-Shattering Pass, he had to face hundreds of thousands of Nanzhao people. Once they crossed Snow-Shattering Pass, they would sweep through the entire south of Dechu State like a plague. Hopefully, the reinforcements could make it in time, father. A clear voice came from behind him. Murong Shen turned around. Murong Ting, dressed in red, walked up the gate tower with a sword in her hand. Murong Shen's face darkened. He said sternly, "What are you doing here? Go down." "Father." Murong Ting said firmly, "Daughter will guard the city with father." "Nonsense. I told you to leave Snow-Shattering Pass immediately. Why haven't you left yet?" Murong Shen loved his only daughter like a treasure. Now that Snow-Shattering Pass was in danger, he had to stay and face his only daughter, but he wanted her to leave first. Murong Ting stubbornly bit the corner of her lips and said, "Ting is not unaware of the current situation. If I leave Snow-Shattering Pass now and fall into Prince Li's hands and be used to threaten father, then daughter can only die." Seeing that Murong Shen wanted to say something, Murong Ting interrupted him and said, "If father wants me to protect me back to the capital, then that's even more unacceptable. Now that the Nanzhao army is about to attack the city, it's time for people. Ting is the daughter of the general of Snow-Shattering Pass, but you still have to take people who can be used to leave. If you do this, Ting is not worthy of being the daughter of the Murong family." Murong Shen was speechless at his daughter's words. After a while, he sighed and said, "Snow-Shattering Pass is very dangerous now." Murong Ting said proudly, "When father goes to war, when is it not dangerous? Since father wants to guard Snow-Shattering Pass, Ting, as a descendant of a general, naturally can't retreat." Murong Shen knew his daughter's temperament. He also knew that the road back to the capital was not safe. He could only sigh, "Forget it. Be careful." "Thank you, father." Seeing that Murong-shin did not insist, Murong-ting was overjoyed. Ting will definitely not lose father's face. Wang Fei, something bad has happened. Yili and the others rushed to Snow-Shattering Pass without stopping. Nanzhao and Prince Li's attack was too sudden. When the Black Cloud Cavalry entered Nanjiang, it had already attracted many people's attention. Naturally, it would not be as smooth as when they came. Yili could only take an heir, and San and a few Black Cloud Cavalry soldiers. The others scattered and returned to Dongchu. What happened? Yili frowned and pulled on the reins. The Black Cloud Cavalry soldier whispered, Commander Wu Qingliang was assassinated. The reinforcements from Yongzhou were ambushed as soon as they crossed the river. The entire army was destroyed. Yili's heart trembled. How far are we from Snow-Shattering Pass now? An heir said, there's still half a day's journey. But Snow-Shattering Pass has been surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Nanzhao soldiers. I'm afraid we won't be able to enter the pass even if we get there. Yili said, take a detour. Don't worry about Snow-Shattering Pass. Go to Yonglin first. Prince Li's army should be arriving soon. Yes, Wang Fei. Snow-Shattering Pass was still the same as it was a few days ago. Sounds of killing and war drums shook the sky. Murong-shin looked at the Nanzhao generals shouting at the city gates with a heavy expression. Staying in seclusion for several days in a row was a serious blow to the morale of the soldiers. Many of the generals by his side could not help but want to go out of the city to fight, but they were all stopped by him. General, please let this subordinate go out of the city to fight. The young general pleaded firmly, his eyes filled with unyielding anger. The Nanzhao soldiers were shouting and cursing at the city gates every day, but they could only stay in seclusion. This made these young and aggressive soldiers hold a fire in their hearts.